Elon Musk, the man who had conquered space, revolutionized the electric car industry, and became a household name worldwide, found himself sitting in a courtroom, facing charges that could potentially destroy everything he had built. His usual confidence, the kind that made him a titan of industry, was now replaced by an unsettling silence. The courtroom was filled with tense energy as the judge, a stern figure with decades of experience, prepared to deliver what many believed would be a life-changing decision. As the courtroom doors closed behind him, the usual buzz of the outside world was suddenly gone. The air was thick with anticipation. Elon, the visionary who had launched rockets into space and made electric cars cool, was now under the scrutinizing gaze of the law. His face, typically so composed, now betrayed a hint of unease. His mind raced through everything that had led to this moment. The world had always expected him to succeed, but today, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. And the cost could be steep. The judge banged the gavel, and the room fell silent. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, her voice steady but filled with authority, "today, you stand before this court not as a billionaire innovator but as a defendant. The charges against you are serious, and this trial could change your future forever." Elon's heart skipped a beat. He knew this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud still hit hard. He had been here before, challenges, obstacles, and hurdles were nothing new to him. But this was different. This wasn't about innovating or pushing boundaries. This was about defending his name, his legacy, and his future. He looked around the courtroom. The jury members were silent, their faces unreadable. The prosecutor, a sharp, calculating individual, was already gathering his documents, preparing for the next phase. The defense team, a group of seasoned lawyers, sat beside Elon, each one doing their best to hide the tension they felt. But it wasn't just the legal battle that weighed heavily on Elon's mind, it was the personal toll. The stakes were higher than ever before. Not only could this trial affect his companies, but it could also change the way the world saw him. Could the man who once redefined industries now be defined by scandal and failure? The prosecutor stood up, walking slowly toward the front of the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is a clear case of manipulation and deceit. Mr. Musk, through his social media platform, has made statements that misled investors, misrepresented facts, and created chaos within the market. His actions, while hidden behind the guise of innovation and progress, have had devastating consequences. This is not just about one individual's greed, this is about the trust of the people and the integrity of the systems that govern us." Elon felt the weight of the words. For a moment, he questioned whether the world had misunderstood him. Was he truly the villain they painted him to be? Was his ambition so overwhelming that it had led him down a dangerous path? The questions rattled in his mind, but he quickly pushed them aside. Doubt had no place here. The defense lawyer stood next, trying to shift the narrative in Elon's favor. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what Mr. Musk is being accused of is a gross misinterpretation of the facts. Mr. Musk has always acted with the utmost integrity, using his position to challenge the status quo and bring about meaningful change. Yes, his statements may have been bold, but they were never meant to deceive or harm anyone." Elon remained still, his eyes fixed on the judge. He knew that this case was more than just a legal battle, it was a battle for his future. And he had to win. His companies, his reputation, and his family all depended on it. As the prosecutor began presenting the evidence, Elon couldn't help but think back to the moments that had led him here. The tweets. The headlines. The mounting pressure. It all felt like a blur, but one thing was clear, it was a fight that he hadn't anticipated. In his quest to change the world, had he become the very thing he sought to fight against? "Mr. Musk," the judge's voice cut through his thoughts. "Is there anything you would like to say before we proceed?" Elon took a deep breath. He knew that this moment, this courtroom, could define his legacy forever. And so, he stood up, facing the judge, the jury, and the world. I may have made mistakes, he began, his voice steady but filled with resolve. But everything I've done because I believe in a future where humanity can thrive, on Earth and beyond. I've never been afraid to take risks, to push boundaries, to challenge the norms. If that makes me a villain in some people's eyes, so be it. But I will not apologize for dreaming big. His words echoed through the courtroom, and for a brief moment, the tension seemed to lift. The defense team nodded in approval, while the prosecutor shot him a look of disdain. The judge, however, remained unmoved. She was not there to make judgments about his dreams or ambitions. She was there to evaluate the facts and ensure justice was served. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," the judge said, her tone neutral. "We will now proceed with the case." Elon sat back down, his mind racing. He had no idea how this battle would end, but one thing was certain, this fight was far from over. And whatever happened, it would be a fight that would change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was never supposed to be here, not in this courtroom, not in this moment. The world had watched him soar to the pinnacle of success, his companies becoming emblems of technological innovation and ambition. But before all the rockets, electric cars, and the public image of a larger-than-life billionaire, there was a young boy who never quite fit in, someone who struggled to find his place in the world. It wasn't always this way for Elon. He wasn't born into wealth and privilege, though that's how the world often viewed him now. His beginnings were humble, marked by hardship and isolation. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon was the son of a Canadian model and a South African engineer. His parents' marriage didn't last long, and young Elon found himself in a household filled with tension and conflict. His father, Elon Musk, was a complicated figure, brilliant but distant, critical and harsh. And while his mother, May Musk, was supportive, she had to work long hours to support her family, leaving Elon to often fend for himself. Elon's childhood was far from ideal. He was bullied relentlessly throughout school, the target of ridicule from classmates who saw his strange mannerisms and intense focus as weaknesses. His love for reading, particularly science fiction, set him apart from the other kids, and as he devoured books, his mind began to wander. He had a vision for the future, one far grander than anything anyone around him could imagine. But it wasn't until later that he realized just how different he truly was. By the time he was a teenager, Elon had already started down a path of entrepreneurship, creating and selling a simple video game called Blaster at the age of 12. It was a small victory, but it was enough to ignite a spark in him, a belief that he could change the world if he could just harness the right tools, the right ideas. Still, there was a long road ahead. At 17, Elon moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, seeking a fresh start and a way out of the confines of his childhood home. But even at this young age, Elon was already a visionary, far beyond the scope of the average college student. He was driven, determined, and sometimes, downright stubborn. In a way, this drive was what led him to become the person he was today. It was the reason he built companies that defied expectations and took on challenges most people wouldn't dare to dream of. His time at Queen's was not without its struggles, though. The isolation he felt as a young immigrant was real. He was far from his family, without the safety net that many of his classmates took for granted. But what he lacked in support, he made up for in relentless ambition. He soon transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both physics and economics, disciplines that gave him the foundation to launch his future ventures. Elon was beginning to realize the immense potential of combining technology with human progress, but the hardest battles were yet to come. After graduation, Elon's early ventures proved to be a mixed bag. He co-founded Zip2, a software company that helped newspapers create an online presence, and later sold it for nearly $300 million. From there, he founded X.com, a company that eventually became PayPal, transforming the way people transferred money online. But even as his net worth climbed, his personal life continued to be a storm of conflicting desires. Elon's ambition wasn't just about wealth, it was about vision. Vision of a future that transcended Earth, a future where humans could live on other planets. And so, SpaceX was born. The idea of launching rockets to Mars, something once thought impossible, became Elon's singular obsession. But it wasn't easy. SpaceX faced numerous failures, with rocket after rocket falling short of expectations. But where others would have seen defeat, Elon saw opportunity. He refused to give up, even when his fortune was on the line. While his professional success continued to snowball, Elon's personal life seemed to be unraveling. He had married, divorced, and remarried, with relationships often faltering under the weight of his dedication to his work. His workaholic tendencies and laser focus on his companies meant that those closest to him often felt sidelined. His relationships, especially with his children, were strained as his obsession with success took precedence. Yet, despite these personal sacrifices, Elon remained steadfast in his belief that his work would ultimately change the world for the better. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Elon's outspoken personality, especially his presence on Twitter, began to get him into trouble. What had once been a simple platform for expressing thoughts and ideas became a battleground, with Musk's controversial posts sparking debates, investigations, and, eventually, the legal trouble that now stood before him in court. It was through his social media activity that the seeds for the trial were planted. A series of tweets, some wild, others bold, had caught the attention of regulators. What Elon thought were harmless messages, part of his unfiltered personality, had become ammunition in a legal war he never expected to fight. The courtroom where Elon now sat was a far cry from the pioneering labs and launch pads that had marked his career. The same man who had made history with each successful SpaceX launch was now battling accusations that his words, his very voice, could have caused untold harm. He had built rockets that could take humans to Mars, yet now he was stuck in a battle that felt as if it could destroy everything he had worked for. As the judge's gavel struck, signaling the end of the day's proceedings, Elon remained unmoving. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered, eager to capture the next twist in this extraordinary saga. The man who had once been hailed as a genius now stood as a defendant in a case that would determine not only his fate but the future of the companies he had built. But even in the face of adversity, Elon wasn't one to back down. This was far from over. The world had underestimated him before, and he had proven them wrong time and time again. The road ahead was long, but he had no intentions of losing the fight. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the city skyline as Elon Musk sat in his office, staring out the window. The trial was approaching its second week, and the pressure was starting to wear him down. For a man who had faced numerous challenges in his life, doubts, failures, and the weight of expectations, this legal battle was unlike anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't about designing electric cars or building rockets. This was about survival. Elon had always been the master of control, the one who could bend reality to his will. But now, he found himself in a fight that felt entirely out of his hands. No amount of innovation or ambition could shield him from the courtroom's glare. Every day, his reputation was on the line, and with it, everything he had worked so hard to create. Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company, all of it could come crashing down in an instant. The pressure wasn't just coming from the legal front. The media had turned on him in full force. Headlines blared across the globe, Elon Musk faces legal reckoning, the man who once dreamed of Mars could be crushed by the law, and Tesla CEO under investigation for misleading the public. It was relentless, suffocating even. Every time he checked his phone, there were new notifications, new stories. People were questioning his integrity, his motivations, and worst of all, his ability to lead. His lawyers, a team of some of the best in the country, had been working tirelessly to prepare his defense. But the more they worked, the more it seemed like there was no clear way out. The charges were serious, claims of market manipulation, misleading investors, and even potential fraud. The prosecution had one thing on their side, a public eager for a scandal. And Elon knew that the public's appetite for drama and controversy was insatiable. He had become both the hero and the villain in a story that was still unfolding. But what was the truth? Elon had always spoken his mind, often without a filter, and he'd gotten in trouble for it more than once. But had he really crossed a line? Had he intentionally misled the public for his own gain, as the prosecution claimed? Or was this just a case of misunderstood ambition, a visionary trying to change the world who had become a target because of his unorthodox methods? As the days dragged on, Elon found himself increasingly withdrawn. He didn't talk to his team at SpaceX as much as he used to, and the meetings at Tesla felt different, more formal, less inspired. He couldn't focus on the big ideas, the grand visions that had once fueled him. The lawsuit had taken center stage, and no matter how hard he tried to push it aside, it was always there, lurking in the background. His mind wandered back to the early days of his career when everything felt like a new frontier. The rush of building something from the ground up, the satisfaction of seeing his ideas come to life. But now, every decision he made felt like it had an additional layer of scrutiny, a constant reminder that every move he made could be used against him. The defense team had spent countless hours combing through his past tweets, examining his social media activity for anything that could be spun into a damaging narrative. One tweet, in particular, had become a focal point of the prosecution's argument. The infamous, funding secured, tweet from 2018. It was a statement that had sent shockwaves through the market, causing Tesla's stock price to soar and sparking investigations into whether Elon had made false claims. "I never intended to mislead anyone," Elon had told his lawyers, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps, in his pursuit of pushing boundaries, he had blurred the lines between what was possible and what was responsible. In the midst of the mounting pressure, Elon's thoughts turned to his family. The relationships he had with his children, his ex-wives, and his current partner had always been complicated. His relentless drive had often meant he was absent when they needed him most. And now, with the world watching his every move, he found himself grappling with feelings of guilt and doubt. Was this all worth it? Was his ambition worth the toll it had taken on his personal life? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was his lead lawyer, an older, no-nonsense woman named Margaret. She stepped inside, her expression serious but composed. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "We've just received new information about the prosecution's case. It's not good." Elon sat up straight, his heart rate quickening. He had been bracing for bad news, but this was different. Margaret's tone, usually so measured, had a level of urgency that caught his attention. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "They found a witness," Margaret began, her eyes locking onto his. "Someone who claims to have direct knowledge of your communications with certain investors. They're saying that you intentionally misled them about the financial status of Tesla and SpaceX, and they're willing to testify against you in court." Elon's stomach sank. A witness? This wasn't just about tweets anymore, it was about people, real individuals with their own stories, their own perspectives on what had happened. If the witness was credible, if they could convince the jury, the outcome of the trial could be disastrous. "Who is it?" Elon asked, his mind racing. "Do we know anything about them?" Margaret shook her head. "We're still gathering information. But this is a game changer, Elon. We need to prepare for the worst. The prosecution is going to use this as their smoking gun." Elon's mind was spinning. He had always known that he lived on the edge, that his bold moves could backfire. But this was different. This wasn't just about his reputation, it was about the entire future of his companies, his vision, and his legacy. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "We'll fight it. We'll prove that this is just another attempt to take me down." Margaret gave him a skeptical look. "It's not going to be easy. The pressure is only going to keep building." Elon leaned back in his chair, looking out the window once again. The weight of everything was crushing, but he had never been one to back down from a fight. He had come too far to let it all slip away. The battle was just beginning, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The courtroom buzzed with a tense energy that Elon Musk couldn't escape. He felt like an outsider in this world, a world that wasn't made for people like him, visionaries who didn't follow the rules, who thought differently and sometimes acted before they fully considered the consequences. But here he was, standing at the crossroads of everything he had built, and the reality of losing it all was creeping closer with every passing minute. Elon's lawyers had spent the weekend scrambling, digging for any cracks in the prosecution's case, trying to find a way to discredit the witness who had suddenly emerged. The stakes had never been higher. Every piece of evidence, every strategy, every word spoken in this courtroom could make or break his future. Yet, despite their best efforts, the prosecution was relentless. The witness, a former Tesla executive with years of insider knowledge, was slated to testify next. As Elon sat at the defense table, his mind raced. He had spent years building Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures from the ground up. Every failure, every setback had made him stronger, more determined to prove that his vision wasn't just a dream, it was a new reality. But now, this witness threatened to tear it all apart. The witness, identified as Ryan Roberts, had worked as a senior executive at Tesla during some of the most turbulent years of the company's rise. He was the kind of person who knew the inner workings of the company, decisions made behind closed doors, internal communications that could have been perceived as manipulative, even when no such intention had ever existed. Ryan had left Tesla under mysterious circumstances, but now he was ready to testify against Elon, and his testimony could spell disaster for everything Musk had worked for. Elon's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp sound of the judge's gavel. The court session had begun. "Will the defense please proceed?" The judge's voice echoed through the room, his tone stern but professional. Elon's heart thudded in his chest. He knew this day could turn the tide, but how? What did Ryan Roberts really know? And more importantly, did he have the power to expose a part of Elon's past that could sink him for good? The defense team had already crafted a narrative that painted Ryan as disgruntled and unreliable. The claim was that Ryan had been let go because of poor performance, and that his testimony was nothing more than a vendetta. But Elon wasn't sure if that narrative would hold up. He had learned long ago that when you're up against something as unpredictable as human nature, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. It wasn't long before the courtroom doors opened, and Ryan Roberts entered. His tall, broad frame filled the doorway, and as he walked towards the witness stand, there was no hiding the air of arrogance that seemed to surround him. The once loyal executive was now the star witness for the prosecution, and the smirk on his face made it clear that he enjoyed the role he was playing. Ryan's testimony began with mundane details, dates, places, conversations that seemed harmless on their own. But slowly, the prosecution started weaving a narrative. They pulled out documents that showed internal communications, emails, and text messages between Elon and certain investors. They began to paint a picture of a man who had used his power and influence to mislead people into believing Tesla was on the verge of something much bigger than it actually was. "Mr. Musk, in your 2018 tweet about funding secured, you made a statement that seemed to promise a buyout of Tesla at a significantly higher price," the prosecutor said, pointing to a series of screenshots that displayed Elon's tweet and the subsequent rise in Tesla's stock price. "I never intended to mislead anyone," Elon replied calmly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing around him. "The tweet was based on discussions I had with potential investors. I believed at the time that it was a real possibility, but those discussions did not materialize." Ryan, sitting in the witness box, seemed unfazed by Elon's defense. Mr. Musk was fully aware that there was no concrete deal. He used that tweet to manipulate the market, to artificially inflate Tesla's stock price, and to create the illusion that the company was worth more than it really was. The words hit Elon like a punch to the gut. For a moment, the room felt smaller, the air thicker. Ryan wasn't just accusing him of being reckless. He was accusing him of something far worse, intentional market manipulation. Elon could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. This wasn't just about a single tweet anymore. It was about a narrative that could define his legacy, for better or for worse. Could he convince the jury that his intentions were never malicious? Or had he, somewhere along the way, crossed a line? His lawyers quickly jumped in to challenge the testimony. Mr. Roberts, are you implying that the discussions with potential investors were not genuine? That Mr. Musk had no belief in the possibility of a buyout? Ryan's expression remained unchanged as he answered, I'm saying that Mr. Musk knew full well that there was no such deal on the table. The conversations were never serious. Elon sat back, his mind racing. He had believed in that tweet. He had believed in the possibilities. But now, it was coming back to haunt him. This wasn't the way he imagined his legacy being shaped. This wasn't the world he wanted to create. As the testimony continued, Elon found himself pulled into a mental whirlpool, lost in a series of what-ifs. What if he had kept his thoughts to himself? What if he had never been so vocal about his visions? What if he had done things differently, played the game by the rules? Would the world still have looked at him as a visionary, or would he have just been another entrepreneur trying to sell the next big thing? But deep down, Elon knew something that others didn't. The world would never understand his vision completely. They would never see the things he saw, the future he was trying to build. In his heart, he knew that the dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species, the dream of a sustainable future on Earth, was bigger than any of the controversies he had ever faced. He had been willing to take risks, to challenge the status quo, to move fast and break things because he believed it was the only way to push humanity forward. The trial would not define him. His work, his legacy, those would. As the defense team began cross-examining Ryan, Elon leaned back in his chair, his thoughts momentarily drifting toward the possibilities that lay ahead. He had fought harder battles before. He could survive this one, too. The only question was, would the world be able to see beyond the courtroom drama and understand the man who had risked everything for a future few could even imagine? The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Elon Musk sat in his chair, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as he tried to steady his nerves. Ryan Roberts' testimony had struck a nerve, and the weight of his words seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud waiting to break. But Elon wasn't about to let the prosecution dictate his future. This was his life's work on the line, and he was determined to fight back with everything he had. As the court session recessed for lunch, Elon found himself alone in a small, dimly lit room. The usual hustle and bustle of the courthouse faded into the background as he stared out the window, lost in thought. His defense team had been working non-stop to counteract the damage caused by Robert's testimony. Every minute felt like an eternity, but there was no time to dwell on it. He had been in high-stakes situations before, negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals, staring down the collapse of his companies, even launching rockets into space. But this felt different. The courtroom was a battleground unlike any other, and the rules were far more complicated. In business, Elon had always relied on instinct, creativity, and boldness. But here, the stakes were personal. Every move had to be calculated. Every word had to be precise. He was jolted from his thoughts as Margaret, his lead attorney, entered the room. Her expression was serious, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes that hadn't been there earlier in the day. Elon, we've got something, she said, closing the door behind her. It's a game changer. Elon raised an eyebrow, suddenly alert. What do you mean? Margaret sat down across from him, her voice lowering to a confidential tone. We've uncovered a discrepancy in Ryan Roberts' testimony. A major one. Something that could unravel his entire credibility. Elon leaned forward, his interest piqued. What kind of discrepancy? We've discovered that Roberts had financial dealings with some of Tesla's competitors around the time he left the company, Margaret explained. These companies were in direct competition with Tesla, and there's evidence that suggests Roberts had a personal stake in seeing Tesla's stock price fall. Elon's mind began to race. If they could prove that Roberts had a motive for bringing down Tesla, it would completely shift the momentum in the courtroom. The prosecution had been playing him as the villain, the man who had manipulated the market. But if Roberts had a personal interest in undermining Tesla, it could discredit his entire testimony. This could change everything, Elon said, a spark of hope lighting up his eyes. How do we prove it? We have the evidence, Margaret replied, her tone firm. We've been able to trace his financial transactions to a series of investments in companies that would benefit from Tesla's downfall. And we've got emails that indicate Roberts was actively working to weaken Tesla's position in the market. Elon felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the kind of break he had been waiting for. He knew that if they could turn this around, it would not only change the course of the trial but also change the narrative about who he was. No longer would he be the villain. He could prove that he wasn't the one manipulating the market. It was Roberts all along. Margaret continued, "We're working on getting the full evidence submitted before the court reconvenes, but we need to act quickly. If we can catch them off guard, we might be able to expose Roberts as the real manipulator." Elon nodded, his determination setting in. "Let's do it. We need to go after this with everything we've got. This is our chance." The court reconvened, and the air was thick with anticipation. Elon could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. As he took his seat at the defense table, he locked eyes with the prosecution team. They were confident, too confident. It was time to turn the tables. Margaret stood up, signaling that it was their turn to cross-examine the witness. She walked confidently to the front of the courtroom, a sense of purpose in every step. The jury watched closely, their eyes shifting between the defense team and the witness on the stand. Ryan Roberts, who had been so sure of his position earlier, now looked uneasy, his confidence beginning to crack. "Mr. Roberts," Margaret began, her voice smooth and controlled, "you've testified that Mr. Musk intentionally misled investors and manipulated Tesla's stock price. But I'd like to bring your attention to something important, something that you failed to disclose." Ryan shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your financial interests in competing companies," Margaret continued, pulling up a series of documents on the screen. "You failed to mention that after your departure from Tesla, you had financial dealings with some of Tesla's direct competitors. Companies that stood to gain from the failure of Tesla." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ryan's face turned pale as the documents were displayed for all to see. He had no response. The evidence was undeniable. "Do you care to explain why, despite your testimony, you never disclosed your financial interests in these companies?" Margaret asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Ryan stammered, trying to regain his composure, but it was clear he was losing control. I don't see how that's relevant." "Oh, it's very relevant," Margaret pressed. "You've been portraying yourself as an unbiased witness, someone with nothing to gain. But in reality, you had a personal financial interest in seeing Tesla's stock price drop. You actively worked against the company, and now you're trying to use your inside knowledge to take down Mr. Musk. Isn't that the truth?" The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation set in. Ryan's face twisted in anger and embarrassment, but he couldn't deny the facts. The defense had landed a powerful blow, and the momentum of the trial had shifted. The prosecution's star witness was now exposed as someone with a motive that went far beyond a simple dispute with Elon Musk. Elon couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. The tables had turned, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself a moment of hope. This wasn't over. There was still a long road ahead, but now, he had a fighting chance. As the defense team continued to press the issue, the tide of the trial began to turn. The jury, once skeptical of Elon, was now watching with new eyes. The prosecution's narrative was crumbling, and for the first time, the defense had the upper hand. The courtroom was still, the air thick with tension. Elon Musk, sitting in his usual spot at the defense table, felt a fleeting sense of triumph after the revelation that Ryan Roberts had hidden his financial ties to Tesla's competitors. It was a hard-fought victory, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The courtroom drama was far from finished, and the prosecution was still far from conceding. As the defense team celebrated their victory in the courtroom, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It felt too easy. Too perfect. A single piece of evidence had altered the trajectory of the trial, but he knew the prosecution wouldn't go down without a fight. He had underestimated how dirty things could get in the courtroom. This was no longer just about one tweet, one deal, or one moment of impulsivity. It was about survival. It was about keeping his empire intact. The next day, the prosecution returned with a new strategy. They had dug deeper, found more skeletons in the closet, and they were ready to strike back. As the defense team entered the courtroom, they were immediately hit with a new wave of evidence, one that threatened to bring everything Elon had built to its knees. The prosecution had uncovered more details about Elon's personal life, his public persona, his rapid growth in wealth, and his controversial statements over the years. They began to attack not just his actions, but his character. They argued that Elon Musk wasn't the visionary he portrayed himself to be. Instead, they painted him as a reckless billionaire who thought he could operate above the law. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor began, "we have here evidence from numerous instances where your actions have bordered on fraud. You've manipulated stock prices, misled investors, and built your empire on a foundation of deception." Elon's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just about a single misstep. This was an all-out attack on his entire legacy. His every move, his every decision, was now under intense scrutiny. The prosecutor continued. "In addition to your 2018 tweet, we also have records showing that you frequently communicated with high-level investors to influence Tesla's stock performance. Your actions have not only affected the market, but also placed countless employees, investors, and stakeholders at risk. Your decisions were not made in good faith, they were made to benefit you, and you alone." Elon's mind raced as the prosecutor presented email after email, text after text, and even phone records that seemed to paint a damning picture. The images on the screen made it clear, Elon had pushed the boundaries of ethics and legality to the brink, and the evidence seemed to support the prosecution's claims. His attorneys scrambled to defend him, but it felt like they were playing catch-up. There was no denying that Elon had always been a bold risk-taker. But now, those risks were being framed as evidence of gross misconduct. For the first time in the trial, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that his empire was in jeopardy. The walls were closing in. The prosecution wasn't just after his fortune, they were after his identity, his persona. They were trying to strip him of everything that made him Elon Musk, the risk-taker, the innovator, the visionary. They wanted to prove that the man who changed the world was nothing more than a fraud hiding behind a mask. The defense team had managed to challenge a few of the accusations, but the damage had been done. The jury's perception of Elon was shifting, and the damage to his reputation could take years to repair, even if he emerged from this trial victorious. As the day wore on, Elon retreated into himself. He couldn't let the prosecution's words take hold of him, but it was hard to ignore the creeping doubt. Had he gone too far? Was his ambition so blinding that he lost sight of the consequences of his actions? He had always told himself that his vision for humanity's future, whether it was electric cars, sustainable energy, or space travel, was worth any price. But now, that vision was being questioned. People were beginning to wonder if he had sacrificed ethics for the sake of progress. The next few days felt like a blur. Elon was bombarded with public scrutiny, both inside and outside the courtroom. The media frenzy surrounding the trial had only grown, and his every move was being scrutinized by millions of people. Social media, once a platform for him to share his ideas and innovations, had turned into a battleground. Comments flooded in, some supporting him, others condemning him. The question on everyone's mind was whether Elon Musk was truly the genius he claimed to be, or whether he was just another self-interested billionaire who had played the system to his advantage. Elon knew that public perception was everything, but in that moment, it felt like the very foundation of his empire was shaking. Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company, all of them stood on the precipice of disaster. A single misstep in the courtroom could have a ripple effect across the business world. Investors were pulling back, stock prices were dropping, and competitors were waiting for the opportunity to strike. Despite the pressure mounting around him, Elon knew he couldn't give up. His desire to push humanity forward, to make the impossible possible, had always driven him. He had been knocked down countless times before and come back stronger. He had faced impossible odds, and yet, he had persevered. He couldn't let this trial, or the media's portrayal of him, dictate his future. In his moments of doubt, he would remind himself why he had started on this journey in the first place. His goal had never been just about money. It had been about changing the world, about taking risks to ensure that humanity had a future. But as the days went by, the courtroom drama was far from over. Each new day seemed to bring fresh revelations that chipped away at his defense. Every new twist in the trial felt like another nail in the coffin of his reputation. Elon wasn't just fighting for his freedom anymore. He was fighting for the very soul of his legacy. The court was packed. Each day, the seats grew more crowded as the world seemed to wait on tenterhooks, watching the dramatic unraveling of Elon Musk's empire. His once untouchable status, marked by his billion-dollar companies and his revolutionary ideas, was being torn apart piece by piece. The media, relentless and unforgiving, painted him as a man who had played with fire and now had to face the consequences. But even in the face of all this pressure, Elon wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. The day after the latest wave of attacks, Elon was sitting in his office at Tesla headquarters. The once bustling atmosphere felt muted. The employees who used to walk with confidence now moved with a sense of hesitancy. News of the trial had filtered through the company, and everyone was looking for reassurance. They needed to know that the company would be okay. They needed to know that Elon Musk was still the visionary they had followed. Elon stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the vast parking lot filled with rows upon rows of Tesla vehicles. His mind was elsewhere, on the courtroom, on the battle he was fighting. The once powerful momentum of his life seemed to have come to a screeching halt. The empire he had built, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, was now facing the very real possibility of crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny and legal consequences. His phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Margaret, his lead attorney. Emergency meeting. Need you here now. Elon took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He knew what the message meant. It was time for a new strategy, but after the way things had been going, what could possibly change the course of this trial? As Elon entered the conference room, the somber faces of his defense team greeted him. Margaret was pacing, her hand clasped behind her back, a clear sign that she was deep in thought. As he sat down at the head of the table, she stopped pacing and faced him. Elon, we've been reviewing the evidence, and we found something big, she began, her tone measured but urgent. But it's going to take a huge risk to use it. Elon raised an eyebrow. What are we looking at? Margaret handed him a stack of papers. It's about the prosecution's key witness, the one they've been relying on the most. Ryan Roberts. We found a connection between him and a group of short sellers who stand to profit from Tesla's downfall. Elon's eyes flicked over the documents. You're saying he was in bed with the people trying to destroy Tesla? Exactly, Margaret confirmed. Roberts has been actively working with short sellers, individuals who have made it their mission to bet against Tesla. He's been funneling information to them, and they've been using it to manipulate the market. We've even traced some of his communications with them. It's all there. Elon leaned back in his chair, feeling a flicker of hope ignite inside him. This could be the break he needed. If they could prove that Roberts was actively working with people who stood to profit from Tesla's failure, it would turn the whole case on its head. We could tear his credibility to pieces with this, Elon said, his mind racing. But how do we use this information? How do we make it stick in court? Margaret's eyes hardened. We go after the prosecution directly. We accuse them of concealing exculpatory evidence, of hiding the fact that their star witness was a paid informant for those trying to bankrupt Tesla. If we can prove this in front of the jury, it'll destroy their entire case. Elon nodded slowly, weighing the options. It was a dangerous play, but it was the only one that could turn the tide. His heart raced with the familiar surge of adrenaline. The thought of risking everything, his freedom, his companies, his reputation, was terrifying. But it was also exactly what he needed. It was time to fight back like never before. The next day, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The prosecution had rested its case, and it was now time for the defense to deliver its closing arguments. Elon knew that this was his one shot. He had to act fast, and he had to hit hard. As Margaret stood up to address the court, she locked eyes with the judge and the jury, her gaze sharp and confident. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, but even she couldn't deny the stakes. The lives of so many people, including Elon Musk's, hung in the balance. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice steady and commanding, the prosecution has tried to paint Mr. Musk as a villain, a man who thought he could manipulate the system for his personal gain. But what they haven't told you is that the key witness against him, Ryan Roberts, has a very, very different story. And I intend to show you the truth. The courtroom fell silent as Margaret began to outline the evidence they had uncovered, the connections between Roberts and the short sellers who stood to profit from Tesla's failure. She methodically laid out the emails, the phone records, the financial transactions, all of it pointing to Roberts as someone who had betrayed Tesla and worked against the very company he had once been a part of. For months, Mr. Roberts has been feeding information to those who wanted to see Tesla fail, Margaret continued. He has lied under oath, and he has hidden his own financial interests. He is no hero. He is the person who tried to destroy this company, all for his own personal gain. The prosecutor's face went pale as the evidence unfolded in front of the jury. They had no response. There was no way to counter this kind of revelation. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the bombshell exploded across the courtroom. Elon watched the entire scene unfold, his chest tight with the weight of everything he had been through. But now, for the first time in weeks, there was a flicker of hope. Could this be the turning point? Could this one last push turn the tide of the trial in his favor? As the day ended and the courtroom emptied, Elon stood outside in the courtyard, staring at the night sky. The pressure of the trial, the weight of the world on his shoulders, felt almost unbearable. But even so, something inside him had changed. The doubt, the fear, the crushing uncertainty, it was all still there. But so was his resolve. He wasn't done yet. For the first time in weeks, Elon allowed himself to think about the future. Whatever happened in that courtroom, he would keep pushing. He would keep fighting. He had to. The trial was nearing its conclusion. And whatever happened next, he knew one thing, he wasn't going down without a fight. The court was set for the final day of the trial. The atmosphere inside the room was electric, tense, expectant, as if everyone knew this was the last stand. Elon Musk sat at the defense table, his face a mask of composure, but his mind was racing. Today, everything would either come crashing down or he would walk out with his name cleared. There was no middle ground, no room for error. The prosecution had already laid out their case, but now, it was his team's turn to push back with everything they had. Elon's throat tightened as Margaret finished her closing statement. Her words had carried the weight of everything he believed in, everything he had fought for. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the jury could see through the accusations and recognize the larger truth, the truth that he wasn't some villain who had manipulated the system, but a man who had made mistakes but was still fighting for a better tomorrow. After a short recess, the jury was ready to deliberate. Elon sat nervously with his team in the back room, waiting for the verdict. The hours stretched into what felt like an eternity. He couldn't escape the gnawing anxiety in his stomach. The stress of the trial had been unbearable, but now, with the end in sight, it felt even more suffocating. His mind wandered, thinking of everything he had risked, the companies, the employees, the future of humanity's mission to colonize Mars. All of it hung in the balance. Finally, the moment came. The courtroom doors opened, and the jury filed in. The judge called the room to order, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Elon could barely breathe as he stood, eyes fixed on the jury. The foreman of the jury stood up, holding the verdict in his hand. The room fell completely silent. Elon's mind raced, his palms sweating as he waited for the words that would define his future. "We, the jury, find the defendant Elon Musk." The foreman began. Elon held his breath. "Not guilty." The words hit him like a tidal wave. Not guilty. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for weeks seemed to lift in an instant. He could hardly believe it. The trial was over. The nightmare was finally over. He had won. The room erupted in applause, but for a moment, Elon didn't hear any of it. He just stood there, numb, trying to process what had just happened. He had been through hell and back, but he was free. The courtroom buzzed with activity, but Elon was lost in his own thoughts. The journey had been long, exhausting, and painful, but in the end, it had all been worth it. He had proved his innocence, and now, he could go back to focusing on his true passion, changing the world. But it wasn't just about Tesla or SpaceX anymore. It wasn't even about him. It was about the future. The future he was determined to make possible, no matter the cost. The media, of course, would report this as a huge victory for Elon Musk. They would praise his defense team and the clever maneuvering that had led to his exoneration. But for Elon, the true victory was something deeper. He had learned that no matter how powerful you become, you could always be torn down. It was about surviving the storm, staying true to your values, and continuing the fight no matter how tough it got. As Elon left the courtroom, surrounded by his legal team, he paused for a moment to look back. The battle had been fierce, but he had emerged stronger. It was time to move forward. And he knew that whatever came next, he would keep fighting, because that was who he was. The courtroom doors closed behind him with a soft, echoing thud, and for the first time in weeks, Elon Musk allowed himself a moment to breathe. The weight of the trial, the tension, the media frenzy, and the public scrutiny, all of it seemed to evaporate in that one brief instant. But even as the relief washed over him, there was no sense of victory. Not yet. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Elon's team gathered around him in the hallway outside the courtroom, their faces a mix of exhaustion and relief. They had done it. He had done it. But even as they congratulated each other, the tension in the air was palpable. There was still so much to do. The legal battle may have been over, but the world's gaze was still fixed on him. People were watching, waiting to see what Elon Musk would do next. Margaret, his lead attorney, approached him with a weary but satisfied smile. "You did it, Elon. You're free." Elon nodded but didn't smile. "This isn't over yet," he said quietly. "The fight for Tesla, SpaceX, and everything we've built, it doesn't end here. There's still work to be done." Margaret's expression softened. "I know. But take a moment, Elon. You've been through hell, and you've come out on the other side. You've proven yourself in ways that most people can't even imagine. The world was waiting for you to fail, and you didn't. That's something." Elon looked out over the busy courthouse plaza, his mind already drifting toward the future. The trial had taken everything out of him, but there was no time to rest. The companies he had built, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, still needed him. The world needed him. There was no time for reflection. Not yet. Over the next few days, Elon found himself in a whirlwind of media interviews, press conferences, and private meetings with his closest advisors. He had been through a lot, more than anyone could truly understand. But in his mind, the most pressing question was no longer about his legal battle. It was about the future. What was next for him? What was next for the companies he had dedicated his life to? Elon sat in a sleek, modern conference room at Tesla's headquarters, looking out at the rows of electric cars parked below. The sunlight filtered through the glass, casting sharp shadows on the walls. His team had gathered to discuss the immediate next steps for Tesla. The trial was behind them now, but the company's future was still in jeopardy. There was work to be done to restore confidence in Tesla's market position, and it needed to happen fast. Okay, Elon began, his voice steady and focused. We've survived the trial. Now, we need to focus on the next chapter. Tesla is stronger than ever. We've got the technology, the products, and the vision. But we need to ensure that the market sees us for what we truly are, a company that is changing the world. He paused for a moment, watching as his team scribbled notes and exchanged glances. We need a new strategy. We're going to double down on our efforts to dominate the electric vehicle market and make renewable energy solutions more accessible than ever. It's not just about cars anymore, it's about creating a sustainable future. We're going to expand faster, innovate harder, and push the boundaries even further. Elon could feel the energy in the room shift. His team was energized. They had come to believe in his vision. They had seen him survive the impossible, and they knew he was ready to lead them into the next phase of Tesla's journey. But even as he spoke about the future, a part of him couldn't shake the lingering effects of the trial. The media had painted him as a villain, someone who had taken risks and failed spectacularly. They'd accused him of putting his company's, and his own freedom, on the line for personal gain. Elon knew that restoring his reputation wouldn't be easy. The public's trust had been shaken. It would take more than just words to rebuild what had been damaged. A few weeks later, as Tesla's stock price began to stabilize and the legal dust settled, Elon found himself standing on the stage at an international tech conference, addressing a crowd of thousands. The buzz in the air was palpable as he stepped up to the podium, his face illuminated by the bright lights overhead. The cameras flashed, capturing every moment. It was time to make a statement. Thank you, Elon began, his voice strong and confident. Thank you for your patience. The last few months have been incredibly difficult, but I want to be very clear about something today. I am more committed than ever to the work we're doing. We are building the future, and the future does not wait. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Elon could feel the weight of their gaze on him, a mixture of skepticism and hope. The past trial, what it showed, what it revealed, was a moment in time. It doesn't define me. It doesn't define Tesla. It doesn't define the work we do. What defines us is the impact we are making on the world, the lives we are changing, and the innovation we are pushing forward. We're not just making electric cars, we're transforming the way humanity thinks about energy, sustainability, and the future of our planet. Elon's words carried the weight of everything he had been through. The scrutiny, the accusations, the personal toll it had taken on him. But there was no room for self-pity. He was here to build, to create, to change the world. And in that moment, he knew that nothing, not a trial, not the media, not even the legal system, could stop him from pursuing his mission. We've overcome a lot. And we'll continue to overcome challenges as we go. But I'm not done. We're just getting started. The crowd erupted into applause. Elon stood there for a moment, letting the cheers wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't going to stop. The fight for a better tomorrow was far from over. As the event concluded, Elon was escorted backstage. The buzz of the conference still filled the air, but his mind was elsewhere. There was no time to celebrate. He had a future to build, a future for Tesla, for SpaceX, for humanity itself. He couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from finished. The court case had been one chapter, but there were so many more to come. The world would always watch him, always question his every move. But that didn't matter. Elon had learned to embrace the chaos, to find strength in the fight. And with that, he knew that no matter what the world threw at him, he would keep pushing. As the days turned into weeks, Elon Musk tried to move forward, immersing himself in the day-to-day operations of Tesla and SpaceX. The media frenzy surrounding his trial slowly began to subside, replaced by a renewed focus on the future of his companies. But deep down, Elon knew something that no one else did: a new challenge was brewing, one that threatened to undo everything he had worked for. It was early one morning when the first sign of trouble emerged. Elon had just arrived at Tesla's Palo Alto headquarters when his assistant, Claire, called him into her office. "Elon, you need to see this," she said, her voice tinged with concern. Elon walked into her office, and she handed him a tablet. On the screen was a news article that made his stomach drop. SEC investigating SpaceX contracts, new allegations surface. Elon's mind raced. After everything he had just gone through with the lawsuit, this couldn't be happening. His hands gripped the edge of the desk as he read through the article. The SEC was now investigating SpaceX's contracts with government agencies. Allegations of irregularities in bidding processes and potential conflicts of interest were raised, and the article hinted at the possibility of further investigations into SpaceX's financial dealings. Claire stood next to him, her eyes wide with concern. "Elon, this could be bigger than the trial. If they find something, anything, this could destroy us. SpaceX is everything to us right now." Elon leaned back in the chair, his mind spinning. He had just gotten out of one legal nightmare, and now, another was looming. It was hard to shake the feeling that there was someone pulling the strings behind the scenes, trying to take him down. This wasn't just a coincidence. He had made a lot of enemies along the way, and he knew it. "This isn't just about SpaceX," Elon said quietly, more to himself than to Claire. "This is about everything we've built. Everything I've worked for." That night, after a full day of trying to calm his staff and reassure investors, Elon sat alone in his office. The room was dark, save for the soft glow of the city lights outside. He stared out of the window, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Who could be behind this? Was this just a regulatory issue, or was someone orchestrating this to destroy him? The trial had been one fight, but this felt different. He couldn't shake the suspicion that someone had targeted him specifically, and the SEC investigation was just the first move in a much larger scheme. He thought back to his time in court. The media had painted him as a reckless billionaire, someone who cared more about his own ego than the companies he had built. But he knew better. He had always fought for something bigger than himself. Tesla was about changing the world. SpaceX was about making life multiplanetary. He wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way of that. As the minutes ticked by, Elon's phone buzzed with a new notification. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the message. It was from his head of legal, Thomas. "We need to meet in the morning. I think we have a bigger problem than we realized." Elon knew then that the investigation was just the tip of the iceberg. The next day, Elon met with his top legal team in a conference room at Tesla's headquarters. Thomas was there, along with Margaret, his trusted attorney from the trial, and several other key members of his legal staff. "We've been through the SEC's initial filings," Thomas began. "And it's worse than we thought. The government contracts in question have been scrutinized for months. There are allegations that SpaceX cut corners to secure these deals. If this goes public, it could not only destroy SpaceX's reputation but potentially endanger future contracts with NASA and the U.S. military. Margaret chimed in. This isn't just a financial issue. It's a trust issue. The government is already on edge about private companies like ours. If these allegations stick, we could lose everything. And the timing couldn't be worse. Tesla is already recovering from the trial. Elon felt the weight of their words pressing on him. I'm not going down without a fight, he said, his voice steely with resolve. We need to handle this quietly and effectively. We can't let the media get a hold of this. I'll deal with the public relations side, but you all need to find out who's behind these allegations, and why they're coming now. Thomas and Margaret exchanged a brief glance before nodding. We'll need to dig deeper, Thomas said. We'll get in touch with the key players involved in these contracts. If there's someone pulling strings, we'll find them. Elon turned to the rest of his team. We're not just defending SpaceX. We're defending everything we've built. I want a full investigation, no stone left unturned. Over the next few days, Elon threw himself into damage control. The SEC investigation loomed over him like a dark cloud, but he refused to back down. SpaceX was his baby, his legacy. He wasn't about to let it be torn apart by a handful of accusations. Meanwhile, his legal team worked tirelessly, uncovering new leads. It became clear that the allegations weren't just random, they were targeted. Someone had been feeding information to the government, likely with the intent of triggering an investigation. But who? And why now, after everything he had just been through? It wasn't long before Margaret uncovered something unsettling. A well-placed source in Washington had tipped off the SEC just before the investigation had gone public. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. Elon's mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. This wasn't just about SpaceX or Tesla. This was personal. Someone wanted to destroy him, and they were willing to use any means necessary to do it. A few weeks later, Elon found himself sitting across from a man he had never met before, a mysterious figure who had contacts in high places and knowledge of things that made Elon's blood run cold. The man claimed to have information about who was behind the SEC investigation and why they were targeting SpaceX. I've seen what's going on, the man said, his voice low and calm. And I think I know who's pulling the strings. But before I tell you anything, you need to understand something. This is bigger than you. This is about power. And if you want to survive, you're going to need more than just a legal team. Elon's eyes narrowed. Who's behind this? The man leaned in, his face barely visible in the dim light of the room. You've made a lot of enemies, Musk. And some of them are willing to do whatever it takes to bring you down. There's a network of people who want you out of the way. And they've been planning this for a long time. Elon sat back, his mind racing. This was the beginning of something much bigger. He had survived the trial, but now it seemed the real war was just getting started. The shadowy forces behind the investigation were only the tip of the iceberg, and Elon was about to face his most dangerous adversary yet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always believed that the biggest challenges he faced were the ones he could see, the technical hurdles, the regulatory red tape, the public skepticism. But now, he was beginning to realize that the most dangerous threats were the ones he couldn't see, the invisible forces conspiring against him from the shadows. The mysterious informant had given him a glimpse into a world of power, influence, and deceit, a world that most people never even knew existed. The SEC investigation was just a small piece of the puzzle, and Elon had a sinking feeling that there was much more to this than simple corporate sabotage. This was personal, and someone, somewhere, was orchestrating it all. Elon sat in his private office, staring at the encrypted message on his screen. It was from the same informant who had warned him about the network of enemies targeting him. The message was brief but chilling. Don't trust anyone. Not even your closest allies. The conspiracy goes deeper than you think. The words echoed in Elon's mind as he sat back in his chair, his fingers gripping the armrests. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. Who could he trust? How could he protect himself, his companies, and his vision from the people who wanted to see him fail? Days turned into sleepless nights as Elon tried to uncover the truth behind the growing conspiracy. His legal team continued to investigate the SEC's claims, but every new lead seemed to only deepen the mystery. The more they dug, the more they uncovered a pattern: strange financial transactions, backdoor deals, and anonymous whistleblowers who were somehow always one step ahead. Elon knew that he couldn't go through this alone. The stakes were too high, and the forces working against him were too powerful. He needed someone who could help him navigate this web of lies and deception. Someone who understood how to play the game of power and influence. That's when he called in an old friend, someone from his past who had been out of the public eye for years but still had connections that could help him see the bigger picture. His name was Alexander Steele, a former government contractor with deep ties to intelligence agencies and private networks. Elon trusted him, but he also knew that Steele operated in the shadows, and his methods were far from conventional. Steele met Elon in a nondescript conference room at Tesla's headquarters. The man was older now, his hair graying at the temples, but his sharp eyes hadn't lost their edge. He had always been a mysterious figure in Elon's life, a man who played by his own rules and never answered to anyone. "Elon, it's been a while," Steele said, his voice low and calm. "I hear you've made some enemies. Big ones, by the looks of it." Elon didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm being targeted, Alexander. The SEC investigation, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I need to know who's behind this. Who's pulling the strings?" Steele leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying Elon closely. "You've made waves, Musk. And when you make waves, you stir up all kinds of currents. The people coming after you aren't just your typical corporate rivals. These are people who have been working in the shadows for years, deep state, private contractors, the kind of players who are used to getting what they want. And they don't like being challenged." Elon's mind raced as Steele's words sunk in. But why now? Why target SpaceX and Tesla when we're so close to changing the world? Steele's gaze darkened. "Because you've become a threat. You're not just a businessman anymore, Elon. You're a symbol of innovation, of progress, of defying the odds. And there are those who can't allow that to stand. They need you to fail, to be taken down a peg, to remind the world that the system still controls everything." Elon's heart pounded in his chest. The more Steele spoke, the more he realized the depth of the conspiracy against him. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. And some people, powerful people, wanted to maintain that control at any cost. The following days were filled with tension as Elon worked with Steele to dig deeper into the web of corruption that seemed to surround him. They tracked down obscure financial transactions, uncovered hidden connections between government agencies and private contractors, and pieced together a story that made Elon's blood run cold. The SEC wasn't just investigating SpaceX, they were part of a larger scheme to take him down. But who was orchestrating it? And what did they hope to gain? Then, a breakthrough came. A name surfaced, someone who had been quietly manipulating events behind the scenes for years. His name was Victor Graves, a high-ranking government official with ties to both the military-industrial complex and the intelligence community. Graves had always been a shadowy figure, operating behind closed doors, making decisions that affected the world without ever being seen in public. Victor Graves was the mastermind. Elon's mind raced. Graves was a man who wielded enormous power, someone who had a hand in shaping the world's future through the decisions he made in the dark. He was the one who had been behind the attacks on SpaceX, manipulating the government's investigation into Elon's company to weaken his position. And now, he was using the SEC as a pawn in his game. Elon knew what he had to do. He couldn't let Graves win. He couldn't let anyone control his future. But taking down someone like Graves wasn't going to be easy. The man was untouchable, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and influence. But Elon had always believed in the impossible, and this time was no different. He wasn't about to let a shadowy figure like Graves dictate the course of his destiny. Over the next few weeks, Elon met with his most trusted allies, including Steele, his legal team, and his key executives at Tesla and SpaceX. Together, they devised a plan to take down Graves and expose the conspiracy for what it was. It would be a dangerous move, but Elon knew it was the only way to protect everything he had built. One evening, as Elon prepared for yet another high-stakes meeting, he stood alone in his office, looking out at the city below. The skyline of Silicon Valley stretched out before him, a symbol of everything he had accomplished. But now, that very city felt like a battleground. He had survived the trial. He had faced down the media. But this was different. This was war. And the enemy wasn't just some corporate rival. It was a force far more dangerous, a system that was determined to crush him. But Elon Musk wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Not now. Not ever. He turned away from the window, his resolve firm. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said to himself. "No one is taking what's mine." The weight of the conspiracy bearing down on him felt heavier with each passing day. Elon Musk had survived countless obstacles in his career, but this was a war against his very existence. As the layers of deceit continued to unfold, the name Victor Graves became a constant presence in his mind. The more he learned about Graves, the more he realized that this wasn't just a battle for business survival, it was a fight for his life. But one thing was clear, Elon Musk wasn't someone who would bow to threats, no matter how insurmountable they appeared. The sun had barely risen over the Silicon Valley skyline when Elon made a decision. It was time to take the fight to Victor Graves. The shadowy figure who had been pulling strings behind the scenes couldn't be allowed to operate unchecked any longer. If Elon wanted to protect everything he had built, the revolutionary companies, the technology that could change the world, he needed to expose Graves and bring the entire conspiracy into the light. He reached for his phone, dialing Steele's number. "Alexander," Elon said, his voice low but determined. "It's time. I want everything on Graves. All of it. We're going after him." Steele's voice crackled through the line. "I knew you'd say that. I'll start pulling everything I have on him. But remember, Musk, we're dealing with someone who's untouchable. This won't be easy." "I'm not here to make things easy," Elon replied coldly. "Get the information. We're going public." For the next several days, Elon's team worked around the clock. Steele's connections, combined with Tesla and SpaceX's resources, managed to dig deeper into Graves' past than anyone ever had. What they uncovered shocked them all. Victor Graves wasn't just a high-ranking government official, he was the key player in a network of corrupt dealings that spanned multiple governments and powerful private organizations. From military contracts to the manipulation of global industries, Graves was a shadowy figure who had orchestrated the downfall of countless adversaries. And now, it was Elon Musk's turn to become one of his victims. But what they found next was even more disturbing. Graves had been working behind the scenes for years to weaken Elon's position, planting false allegations and leaking damaging information to undermine Musk's reputation. It wasn't just a matter of business rivalry, this was personal. Graves was using his influence to take down a man who had the potential to disrupt the entire system he had worked so hard to maintain. Elon paced through the halls of SpaceX's headquarters, his thoughts a whirlwind of fury and determination. The hours of research, the careful planning, it was all leading up to this moment. He was going to expose Victor Graves for the world to see. No more hiding in the shadows. No more games. He called a meeting with his closest allies, Thomas, his legal head, Margaret, his attorney, Claire, his assistant, and Steele, of course. They gathered in the sleek conference room, the air thick with tension. "We've got everything we need," Elon said, his eyes steely. "We're going after Graves, and we're going after him hard. This stops now." Thomas, always calm under pressure, looked up from his notes. "Are we sure about this? Once we go public, there's no turning back. We'll be making powerful enemies." Elon's gaze hardened. "I'm done playing defense. This is the moment we take control. We can't let him keep manipulating things from behind the curtain." Margaret nodded in agreement. "We've already been under attack for too long. We've got the facts, we've got the proof, and we have the platform to make the world listen." Steele leaned forward, his eyes intense. "This won't be a battle in the courts. It'll be a war of influence. We'll need allies, powerful ones, and we'll need to move quickly. Graves will come at us with everything he has." Elon's resolve only hardened. "Then we'll make sure we hit him harder. He won't see this coming." The plan was set into motion. With the full backing of Tesla, SpaceX, and Steele's underground network, Elon Musk took the battle straight to the media. An explosive press conference was arranged, and Elon himself would be the one to expose the conspiracy. The world was about to hear the truth about Victor Graves and the deep-rooted corruption that had been festering in the shadows for far too long. As the day of the press conference approached, Elon couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. He knew that exposing Graves wouldn't just hurt the man, it would shake the foundations of the entire system. This was a power play on a scale he had never attempted before. But the stakes were too high. Elon wasn't going to stand by and let his legacy be torn apart by a corrupt system. The day of the press conference arrived, and a sea of reporters gathered in the large, modern conference hall. Cameras flashed, microphones were raised, and the world waited with bated breath. Elon stood at the front of the room, his face calm but his heart pounding. This was his moment. He stepped up to the podium, glancing over the sea of eager faces. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elon began, his voice clear and unwavering, "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, but as a man who has been the target of a coordinated and malicious attack. For months, powerful individuals have worked tirelessly to bring me down, to destroy everything I've built." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Elon pressed on. "The name you may have heard recently is Victor Graves. A man whose influence stretches far beyond what anyone could imagine. A man who has manipulated government systems, undermined businesses, and used his power to serve his own interests, no matter the cost." The reporters shifted in their seats, sensing the gravity of the moment. Elon continued, his words steady and powerful. "Today, I will show you the truth about Victor Graves and the web of corruption he has spun behind the scenes. I will show you the documents, the evidence, and the proof that Graves has been orchestrating attacks on my companies and my reputation. I will expose him for who he really is." Elon's team unveiled a series of damning documents and recordings that left no room for doubt. In a carefully planned exposé, they revealed how Graves had manipulated government contracts, orchestrated false investigations, and leaked confidential information to harm SpaceX and Tesla. It was the kind of revelation that could bring down a powerful empire. The world watched in shock as the truth came to light. The SEC investigation that had been launched against SpaceX was exposed for what it truly was, a weapon used by Graves to destroy a rival he saw as a threat to his carefully constructed world. And now, the battle was on. Elon had taken the first shot, but he knew this was only the beginning. Graves would retaliate, and the war would escalate from here. But for the first time in a long while, Elon felt like he was finally in control. The truth had been unleashed. The world had watched as Elon Musk stood before a global audience and exposed Victor Graves for the powerful figure he truly was. The press conference sent shockwaves through the media, and the reactions were instantaneous. Headlines blared across the globe, and social media exploded with debates about the revelations. Elon had taken a huge risk, but now the world knew the truth. But as with every battle, there would be consequences. The first wave of fallout hit almost immediately. Elon's social media was flooded with comments, some supportive, others critical, but all under a magnifying glass. People were questioning his motives, his integrity, and whether he was truly in the right to take such a public stand. The media jumped on every possible angle. Was this a desperate move by a man trying to save his empire? Was he trying to destroy a man in power to cover up his own missteps? Elon had expected backlash, but the speed and intensity of it caught him off guard. Even some of his closest allies began to question his decision. Some investors were pulling their support, citing the uncertainty that now loomed over Tesla and SpaceX. Others were already calling for him to back down, to apologize, to de-escalate before the situation turned into something even uglier. And then there was Victor Graves. In the days that followed, Graves remained silent. His social media presence vanished, and no public statements were made. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. But Elon knew better than to assume his opponent would lie down quietly. Graves was no ordinary adversary. He was a man who had built his empire on power, manipulation, and secrecy. He would retaliate. Elon's phone rang one evening as he sat alone in his office, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past few days. It was a call from Steele. "Elon, I've been digging deeper. Graves didn't take this lying down. He's making moves behind the scenes, hard ones. We're talking serious leverage. He's got connections that run deep, and they're already trying to distance themselves from him. They're looking to clean up their image and make you look like the bad guy." Elon clenched his jaw, frustration building. "I expected as much. What's his next move?" Steele hesitated. "It's not just about the media anymore. Graves has connections within the legal system, and he's been working to undermine your case. He's already begun pushing for a new investigation into your companies. It's going to get messy, Elon. We need to prepare for a full-scale assault. This is no longer just about exposing him, it's about survival." Elon felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The media circus, the investors pulling out, the legal battles, all of it was coming to a head. But he had come too far to back down now. He wasn't about to let Graves, or anyone, dictate the course of his future. He reached out to his inner circle, gathering the team he trusted the most. Thomas, Margaret, Claire, Steele, they would need to work together like never before if they were going to survive this onslaught. "We have to hit him harder," Elon said, his voice firm. "We'll launch a counteroffensive. Not just in the media, but in the courts. We can't let him dictate the narrative. We'll show the world that this isn't just about a business rivalry. This is about power, corruption, and the system trying to silence those who threaten it." The counteroffensive was swift and calculated. Elon's legal team launched a preemptive strike, filing lawsuits to block any new investigations that Graves and his allies were attempting to push forward. They exposed more of Graves' corrupt practices. Documents that had been carefully hidden for years were now in the public eye, painting a picture of a man who had used his power for personal gain at the expense of others. In the media, Elon began to regain control of the narrative. Instead of responding to every accusation, he turned the tide by shifting the focus back onto the corruption and the people who had been using the system to manipulate and exploit. His team released exclusive interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, and new revelations that further exposed Graves' empire of deceit. The public was torn. On one hand, there were those who believed Elon was simply defending himself, his companies, and his vision for the future. On the other hand, there were critics who saw him as a man desperately trying to salvage his reputation by attacking those in power. But Elon had a different strategy in mind. As the storm of controversy raged on, Elon knew that the key to winning this battle was not just about playing defense. It was about finding his next move. The goal wasn't simply to protect Tesla and SpaceX, it was to prove a larger point. He was challenging a system that had been built to crush disruptors, innovators, and anyone who dared to step outside the lines. One evening, as Elon sat with his team, his mind raced through countless ideas and plans. He needed to do something bold, something that would make people stop and take notice. Then, it hit him. Let's go beyond just the companies. Let's take this fight to the very heart of the system, he said, his eyes lighting up with determination. It's not just about beating Graves. It's about showing the world that the system is broken, that it's rigged against anyone who wants to change the world. Let's focus on innovation. We'll start with something bigger than just Tesla and SpaceX. The plan was simple but audacious. Elon would launch a new initiative, a public, open-source project that would disrupt the very systems that Graves and others had worked to protect. This initiative would harness the power of the masses, pulling together the brightest minds, the most innovative thinkers, and the people who had always been excluded from the halls of power. The goal? To create an independent network of innovation that was free from the control of corporate giants and corrupt systems. A movement that would challenge the old guard and reshape the way the world thought about progress. It was a risky move, but Elon had never been afraid to take risks. He had built Tesla and SpaceX against all odds. Now, he would build something even bigger, a movement that would unite people around the world in the fight for innovation and transparency. The response to Elon's new initiative was nothing short of explosive. Within days, the project gained millions of followers and supporters. Social media buzzed with excitement, and the media was once again forced to pay attention. The system had never seen anything like this, a grassroots movement powered by innovation and transparency, led by one of the most disruptive figures the world had ever known. But Graves was not one to take defeat lightly. As the project gained momentum, the stakes grew even higher. Graves, who had been biding his time, finally made his move. Behind the scenes, his allies were quietly working to discredit Elon's initiative, to brand it as a dangerous, reckless venture that threatened the very foundation of society. But Elon wasn't going to let them control the narrative. Not this time. The stage was set for an all-out battle, not just for business dominance, but for the future itself. And as the world watched, Elon Musk stood at the center of it all, determined to fight not only for his companies but for a future where innovation and integrity could thrive in a broken system. Elon had made his move. The world had witnessed the audacity of his exposé, and now, the question was, would the world stand by him? Or would Victor Graves, hidden in the shadows, tear him apart? The initiative Elon had launched was gaining traction, drawing in people from all over the world, eager to be a part of something revolutionary. It was more than just a business venture, it was a movement. But movements, as Elon knew too well, didn't just rise, they had to be defended. And defending this one would take more than just innovation, it would require a battle of influence. The first signs that Graves wasn't going down without a fight came within days. The media that had once praised Elon for his transparency and bravery was suddenly filled with attacks. The Musk movement, a farce built on false hope, headlined one article. Is Elon Musk's open-source project really a Trojan horse for more power? Questioned another. Graves' loyalists had mobilized, leveraging their deep-rooted influence in the media to cast doubt on Elon's latest venture. The same journalists who had previously been championing his every move were now writing pieces questioning his intentions. They painted the initiative as a desperate attempt to distract the public from the legal battles, framing Elon as a man on the edge, someone who could no longer be trusted. To make matters worse, there were rumors, circulated by the very outlets Graves controlled, that the project was a cover for some far-reaching agenda, a way for Elon to consolidate even more power. Elon watched as his vision for a new future was twisted into something dark, something manipulative. It was frustrating, to say the least. But in his heart, he knew that the fight wasn't just about public opinion, it was about proving that change was possible, and that he could inspire others to believe in it. Steele called him that evening, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Elon, it's worse than I thought. Graves has already started making moves to sabotage your initiative. He's got lobbyists working on Capitol Hill, and there's talk about regulatory bodies investigating your project. How soon will they act? Elon asked, his voice calm but filled with intensity. Within the week, maybe sooner. The plan is to paint your initiative as a threat to national security, something that could destabilize the economy and the tech industry. Elon rubbed his temples, frustration bubbling up. This was the exact play he had been preparing for, the old tactic of using bureaucracy to crush an idea. But he had an ace up his sleeve. His project wasn't just a business, it was a movement, and movements didn't die from legal threats alone. Let's turn it on its head, Elon said after a beat of silence. If they want to call it a threat, we'll show them just how much support we have. We'll make it impossible for them to ignore us. The next phase of Elon's plan was something that had never been attempted before. He would turn to the people, the very supporters who had rallied around his vision. Using the network he had cultivated, he launched a massive global campaign, encouraging people from all walks of life to get involved. They would flood the streets, not with protests, but with solutions. Elon's initiative wasn't just about tearing down the old system, it was about building a new one from the ground up. He encouraged his followers to submit their own innovations, ideas that could change the world for the better. The goal was to gather as many fresh, forward-thinking solutions as possible, creating an overwhelming wave of support that would make it impossible for lawmakers and regulators to ignore. Within days, the initiative had grown exponentially. Thousands of ideas were submitted, from clean energy solutions to medical breakthroughs, all aimed at disrupting the systems that had kept the status quo in place for so long. It was a decentralized network of thinkers, creators, and dreamers. The hashtag #Change the System began trending globally. The movement was no longer just a business venture, it had evolved into a call to action. The voices of the people had become louder than ever, and Graves was starting to realize that he had underestimated Elon Musk. Behind the scenes, though, things were beginning to get even more complicated. Graves, furious at the growing momentum of Musk's initiative, began tightening his grip on those in power. His influence ran deep, and now he was pulling every string to try to discredit Elon once and for all. But there was one thing that Graves didn't anticipate: the people. As the global campaign grew, so did the pressure on lawmakers. People who had once been loyal to Graves found themselves facing protests from their own constituents. Calls for transparency, for real change, began to echo in halls that had long been silent. The cracks in the system were showing, and Graves was losing his grip. Elon knew this was just the beginning, but it was the first real victory. They had shown the world that change was not only possible, it was happening. The next twist came when a major international tech conference invited Elon to speak. It was the kind of event that could solidify or break his reputation on the global stage. Graves, however, wasn't about to let Elon take the spotlight without a fight. Elon, Claire said, as they sat in his office discussing the invite. Graves has already sent word that he's pushing for you to be blacklisted from the conference. He's using his connections to pressure the organizers into backing down. Elon stood up, his eyes narrowing. That's exactly what he wants to silence me. But if they ban me, they ban the message. We can't let that happen. Instead of backing down, Elon saw this as another opportunity. If Graves could manipulate the conference organizers, it would only strengthen his position as the oppressive force. Elon would turn it into a global statement, showing that those who resisted change were afraid of progress. We won't just attend the conference, Elon said with determination. We'll use it as a platform to show the world what's at stake. If they try to silence us, we'll speak even louder. The countdown to the conference began, and as Elon's team prepared for the possibility of being banned, the pressure from Graves only grew. But Elon had become a master at turning pressure into power. Every challenge, every roadblock, only fueled his resolve to see this through to the end. Then, just as the conference date approached, a surprise move came from Graves. He attempted to launch a competing initiative, one that promised similar benefits, but with a much more controlled, top-down approach. It was the perfect countermeasure, except for one glaring flaw: it lacked the soul of what Elon's initiative had become. It lacked the people. As the day of the conference drew near, Elon prepared to make his stand. This was no longer just a business decision. This was the moment where he would either prove that innovation and the voice of the people could overcome the old guard, or he would be silenced forever. The stage was set. Elon Musk had called the world's attention with his audacious move to reshape the future. His initiative was gaining momentum, and support was flooding in from every corner of the globe. But as the International Tech Conference loomed large on the horizon, so did Victor Graves' iron grip on the system. Graves wasn't about to let his empire fall without a final, crushing strike. He had seen Elon's challenge for what it was: a direct assault on the power and control that had allowed him to build his empire. He was willing to do anything to preserve it. And he wasn't alone. The corporate oligarchs, the media moguls, the regulatory authorities, they all stood with him, each protecting their own interests, all linked in a web of power. But Elon had a different vision. This wasn't just about defeating Graves, it was about dismantling a system that perpetuated corruption and silencing those who dared to disrupt it. The night before the conference, Elon sat in his private office. His team had worked tirelessly to prepare for the biggest moment of his career. They had carefully crafted his message, ensuring that it would resonate with the millions who had already rallied behind him. But he knew it wasn't just about his words, it was about the global spotlight that would be cast on him the next day. "Tomorrow, we face them head-on," Elon said, his voice steady. "Graves may have the power, but we have the people. The world is watching, and now it's time to show them what we stand for." Thomas, one of Elon's most trusted advisors, stood beside him. "Elon, Graves won't just let this slide. He's got people in high places. His attack won't just be through the media, it's going to be bigger than that." "I know," Elon replied. "But what they don't understand is that this isn't just about me. This is about something far bigger. It's about the future of humanity. It's about showing the world that we can build a new system, one that's not run by a few powerful elites, but by the collective power of individuals who care about progress." The morning of the conference arrived, and Elon's heart raced with anticipation. He knew the risks. If things went wrong, if Graves was able to pull enough strings, the initiative could be discredited, and Elon's name could be dragged through the mud once more. But there was no turning back now. As Elon stepped onto the stage, the auditorium was packed with industry leaders, innovators, journalists, and influencers from all over the world. The eyes of millions more were glued to screens, watching the live stream of the event. Elon had fought for this moment, for a chance to speak to the world about the power of innovation, transparency, and collective action. It was now or never. "Thank you," Elon began, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elon Musk. And I stand here today not as a businessman, but as someone who believes that change is not only possible, it's inevitable. And it's happening right now." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, waiting for him to continue. "For years, we've been told that the system is too big to change. That the status quo is untouchable, that the rich and powerful will always win. But I'm here to tell you that we can create a new system, a system where innovation, not power, drives progress. A system where the voices of the people can no longer be ignored." The crowd erupted in applause. For a brief moment, Elon felt the weight of their support. This was why he had come. This was why he was fighting. "But it's not going to be easy," Elon continued, his voice gaining strength. "I know there are those who would rather keep things the way they are. People who would rather suppress innovation than embrace it. And those people are afraid of what we're building. They will stop at nothing to discredit us, to tear us down." As Elon spoke, his mind drifted briefly to Victor Graves. He could already feel the man's influence, lurking just beyond the spotlight. But Elon wouldn't be intimidated. This was his moment. "We are not here to back down," Elon said, his words now thunderous. "We are here to break the chains of a broken system. We will challenge the establishment. And together, we will create a future where innovation is not a privilege, but a right." The crowd was on its feet, cheering. It was a moment of triumph for Elon, but the true test was still to come. As Elon wrapped up his speech, he felt the tension in the room rise. Graves' loyalists were already beginning to mobilize. He could sense their presence, even if they remained hidden in the shadows. But Elon wasn't afraid. He had known this moment would come, and he was ready. The questions began. The journalists who had once been sympathetic to him now turned their attention to the dark side of his campaign. They were skeptical, asking questions about the legality of his new initiative, about the risks it posed to national security, about the rumors of corruption that were swirling around him. But Elon remained calm, answering each question with confidence and clarity. He wasn't just defending his project, he was defending his vision for the future. "I understand your concerns," Elon said, addressing the room. "But I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for your action. We are building something that will change the way the world works. And it's not just about technology. It's about creating a world where anyone, anywhere, can have a hand in shaping the future." As the press conference drew to a close, Elon felt a sense of accomplishment. He had delivered his message. He had stood up to the powerful forces arrayed against him. But the battle was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Elon returned to his hotel suite, exhausted but determined. His phone buzzed with messages from his team, urging him to stay vigilant. Graves was making his move. Later that evening, a major breaking news story hit the airwaves. It was a bombshell. Victor Graves had managed to manipulate a key figure within the government to initiate an emergency investigation into Elon's initiative. Graves had accused Elon of using his project to funnel money into undisclosed accounts and mislead investors. The accusation was explosive. If proven true, it could destroy everything Elon had built. The media went into overdrive, and once again, Elon found himself at the center of a media storm. The very same people who had once hailed him as a visionary were now questioning his integrity. The system, it seemed, was fighting back with everything it had. But Elon wasn't ready to give up. He had faced adversity before. He had overcome the impossible. And now, he would face this challenge the same way he always had, with determination and resolve. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The accusations against Elon Musk were everywhere. Headlines screamed about fraud and corruption. His team was working overtime, scrambling to refute the claims, but the weight of the scandal was heavy, and the public reaction was swift. People who had once rallied behind his cause began to waver, unsure of what to believe. It wasn't just an attack on his initiative, it was an attack on his character. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt the true gravity of the battle he was fighting. The tech world, which had once been his playground, now felt like a battlefield. Every step forward was met with resistance, every new move scrutinized and dissected by those who sought to see him fall. In the midst of the chaos, Claire entered Elon's office with an urgent expression on her face. "Elon, the investigation into your project is gaining momentum. They've subpoenaed your financial records. It's only a matter of time before the public sees everything. We need to prepare for a full-scale media assault." Elon didn't flinch. He had expected this. "I know," he replied, his tone unwavering. "But we can't let this define us. We have to keep pushing forward. There's too much at stake now." He stood up from his desk and walked toward the window, looking out over the city. "I didn't get to where I am by playing it safe, Claire. If they want to play dirty, then let's give them a game they've never seen before." As Elon plotted his next move, the world continued to shift beneath his feet. The media attack was relentless. Every statement he made was twisted. Every move he made was scrutinized. The allegations were everywhere, and the truth seemed irrelevant. Despite the weight of the situation, Elon remained resolute. He had always believed in the power of transparency, and now, he needed to show the world just how far his commitment to that principle went. He would open the books, show everything. If Graves wanted to tear him down with lies, Elon would expose the truth and let the public decide for themselves. Late one night, as Elon sat in his office, his phone buzzed with a new message from Thomas. It was a link to a live stream that was quickly going viral. The screen flashed with an image of a familiar face, Victor Graves. Elon's heart sank as Graves began to speak. "Elon Musk," Graves said, his voice dripping with contempt. "A man who claims to be the future of innovation but has always hidden behind a veil of secrecy. He's a fraud, a charlatan. And I'm here to expose the truth." The live stream went on to show a series of documents, some of which appeared to link Elon's initiative to shell companies and secret accounts. There were connections to international investors who had been implicated in financial scandals. It was the perfect storm. The pieces fit together in a way that was difficult to dismiss. Graves had played his hand, and now the world was watching. Elon watched in stunned silence as the live stream continued. His mind raced. How had Graves gotten his hands on this information? Some of it was true, but much of it had been manipulated. He knew that. "Elon, are you seeing this?" Claire called out from the doorway, her face pale. "This is exactly what we feared. The public is turning. We can't fight this on our own." Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was working at full speed, trying to find the best course of action. This wasn't just a fight for his initiative anymore, it was a fight for his reputation, his legacy. If the truth didn't come out soon, the consequences would be devastating. Finally, he turned to Claire. "We need to call a press conference. We need to take control of this narrative before Graves does." The next morning, Elon Musk stood before the cameras, prepared to confront the allegations head-on. The world's media was there, waiting for him to break under the pressure. He stepped up to the podium, his face calm but his eyes burning with intensity. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know what you've all seen in the past few days. The allegations. The accusations. But let me be clear, I am not here to make excuses. I am here to set the record straight." Elon paused, looking out over the sea of reporters, knowing that every word he said could either clear his name or condemn him forever. "For years, I've been open about my mission. I've made mistakes along the way, some of them costly, but I have never hidden from the truth. This initiative, the one I've been building, is the future. But the forces that want to protect the old system will stop at nothing to destroy it. And that's why they've been spreading lies about me and my work." He took a deep breath, his voice steady as he continued. "Yes, there were financial dealings that I was involved in. Yes, there were partnerships that I didn't always communicate fully. But the reality is, every step I've taken has been for a purpose, to build something that would change the world for the better. And every step, every decision, has been made in the pursuit of that goal. The truth is, this isn't about money or power. It's about creating a system where the future is built by the people, not by a handful of elites." Elon's voice grew more impassioned as he spoke. "What Victor Graves doesn't want you to know is that this is about more than just me. It's about the people who have put their trust in me, who believe in what we're building together. And I won't let him tear that down with lies." The room was silent, the weight of Elon's words hanging in the air. He had laid it all on the line. The question now was whether the world would believe him, or whether Graves' lies would be enough to seal his fate. As the press conference ended, Elon could feel the shift in the air. He had exposed himself to the world, showing his vulnerability and his commitment to his cause. But there was still a long road ahead. Later that evening, as Elon sat with his team, they reviewed the fallout. The press conference had been well received, but the battle was far from over. There were still those who doubted him, who believed Graves' version of events. And the investigation was still ongoing. "Elon, I think we did the right thing," Claire said quietly. "But Graves won't let up. He's playing a dangerous game, and he's got the resources to win." Elon nodded, his eyes dark with resolve. "He can try. But we've got something he doesn't have, the truth. And we're not backing down. Not now. Not ever." Elon sat at his desk late into the night, staring at the reports flooding in from every corner of the world. The media landscape was divided. Some believed him. Others were ready to dismiss him entirely. But amidst the noise and chaos, one thing stood out, a message from an unexpected source. It was an encrypted email with no subject, sent from a name Elon recognized but hadn't heard from in years, Samantha Ward. Samantha was a former executive at one of the largest tech firms in the world, one that had been closely aligned with Graves' empire. She had disappeared from the scene after a massive fallout with Graves, but Elon had always suspected there was more to her story. She had been one of the few people in the industry with both the intelligence and moral compass to stand up to the corrupt forces that were pulling the strings behind the scenes. The email's contents were brief but chilling. "I know what Graves is doing. I have the evidence you need. But you need to act fast. He's moving too quickly, and you're running out of time." Elon read the message again, unsure of what to make of it. Samantha had always been enigmatic, and now, it seemed she was offering him a chance at redemption, perhaps the last chance. Elon didn't hesitate. He immediately set up a secure meeting with her. He needed the truth. He needed her help. The next day, they met in a small, unmarked building on the outskirts of the city, a far cry from the polished, high-tech offices they were both accustomed to. The room was stark, with only a few chairs and a table. The air was thick with tension as Elon sat across from Samantha, her sharp eyes scanning him with a mix of caution and determination. "I didn't think I'd see you again, Musk," she said, her voice low and steady. "You've made quite the mess of things." Elon leaned forward, not taking her words personally. He was here for one thing, the truth. "What do you know about Graves?" he asked, his voice unwavering. Samantha's lips curled into a faint smile, though it lacked warmth. "I know enough to make him a very dangerous man. But more importantly, I know what he's hiding. And you need that if you want to survive." Elon was silent, waiting for her to continue. "Graves is running a parallel operation," Samantha said, her voice growing more intense. "It's not just about the tech industry. He's infiltrated the financial sector, the government, and the media. He's got his fingers in everything. But there's a weak spot. And that's where you come in." Elon's mind raced. "A weak spot? What do you mean?" "Graves has been using your project, your idea, to funnel money. But it's not your initiative that's at risk. It's his." Samantha's eyes locked onto his. "You've been framed. They've planted evidence to make it look like you're the one laundering money, but it's really him. He's been playing both sides. And he's been using your success to cover up his own criminal activity." Elon couldn't believe what he was hearing. It sounded too unbelievable, too perfect. But Samantha had always been a sharp and reliable source in the past. If anyone knew how deep Graves' corruption went, it was her. "You have proof?" Elon asked, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Samantha nodded. "I do. But it's not going to be easy to expose. Graves has a network of people who will protect him at all costs. If you want to bring him down, you'll need to do it carefully, with precision. And you'll need to act fast. The longer you wait, the more he can cover his tracks." Elon felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the break he needed. The next few days were a blur of action and secrecy. Samantha provided Elon with the key evidence, documents, encrypted files, and communications that painted a damning picture of Graves' involvement in illegal financial schemes. She had done the unthinkable, infiltrated Graves' organization from the inside, gathering intel that no one else had been able to access. But as the pieces began to fall into place, Elon realized just how far-reaching the conspiracy was. Graves hadn't just targeted him, he had manipulated the entire system, including the very institutions that were meant to protect people like Elon. The fight ahead would be nothing short of monumental. Elon knew that the public needed to see the truth for themselves. The court of public opinion had already turned against him, but this new information could shift the narrative. The question was how to get it out there without risking everything. With Samantha's help, Elon's team began working on a plan to expose Graves' criminal activities to the world. They couldn't rely on traditional methods, Graves had already corrupted much of the media. They needed to take a more direct approach, an unfiltered, undeniable reveal that would make it impossible for anyone to deny the truth. Elon wasn't afraid of the backlash. He had been vilified before, but this time, the stakes were higher. If he didn't act, Graves would win. And the future of innovation would be in grave danger. The night before the big reveal, Elon found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people who had supported him, the vision he had built, and the future he was determined to create. But he also knew that everything he had worked for could come crashing down in an instant if the public didn't trust him. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. "You've got this," he whispered to himself, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He had faced impossible odds before. This was no different. The next day, Elon Musk stood before the world once more, this time at a live press conference held at a secure location. The media had been invited, but this time, they were not in control of the narrative. This time, Elon had the upper hand. As the cameras flashed and the reporters murmured among themselves, Elon took his place at the podium. His eyes locked onto the crowd, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Thank you for being here," Elon began, his voice calm but filled with authority. "For the past few weeks, I've been accused of crimes I didn't commit. My character has been attacked, my motives questioned. But I am here today to set the record straight." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "The truth is, the person who has been manipulating the system, using my name and my initiative to cover up his crimes, is none other than Victor Graves. And I have the evidence to prove it." With a flick of a button, a massive screen behind him lit up with the documents, the evidence Samantha had gathered. Emails, bank transfers, and encrypted messages, all detailing Graves' corrupt activities. The room fell silent. The reporters were stunned, unable to process what they were seeing. Elon had just flipped the script, exposing the man who had been trying to destroy him. The news was out. The truth had been exposed to the world. Elon Musk had finally confronted the media, presenting the damning evidence against Victor Graves. The response was immediate and explosive. For a few brief hours, the world held its breath. News outlets erupted with headlines that echoed Elon's accusations. "Victor Graves exposed, the man who manipulated Musk," they screamed. Social media platforms lit up with outrage, confusion, and disbelief. People were sharing the explosive documents and replaying Elon's statement over and over. But amid the shock, another unsettling reality began to settle in. Elon could feel it in the pit of his stomach. Victor Graves wasn't going to let this go quietly. As the days passed, Graves made no public statement. Instead, he went silent, retreating into the shadows. But Elon knew that silence was dangerous. Graves was a man who had built an empire on manipulation, and if he had one weakness, it was his pride. He would strike back, and when he did, it would be with everything he had. Elon and his team gathered in their war room, staring at the live feeds on the screens around them. There was no question anymore, the battle for the future was now in full swing. They had struck first with the evidence, but the next move would determine everything. Claire sat beside Elon, her brow furrowed. "We're getting a lot of support from the public, but Graves still has his hold over the legal system, the media, and a lot of influential figures. He's not just going to lie down and take this. Elon nodded. I know. He'll try to discredit us next. He'll twist the narrative. We need to stay ahead of him, stay in control. The only way we win this is if we maintain our momentum. Samantha, who had been invaluable in providing the evidence that exposed Graves, spoke up from across the room. The next step is crucial. We can't just let him refute the documents we released and move on. We need to keep the pressure on him, expose his network, not just the man. Elon agreed. The evidence was powerful, but it was just the beginning. If they were going to take Graves down, they needed to show that his corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. As the hours ticked by, Elon's team worked furiously to assemble their next move. They would target Graves' allies, those who had helped him build his empire. They would expose the corruption at every level. It wasn't enough to discredit Graves, they needed to dismantle his entire network. But even as they plotted their strategy, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Graves was calculating, methodical. And he wasn't going to let this go without a fight. That evening, Elon received a message that confirmed his worst fears: Graves had launched a counterattack. The media suddenly pivoted, spinning the story in an entirely new direction. News outlets began reporting that the evidence against Graves was fabricated, that it had been manipulated by unknown forces. They questioned Elon's motives, suggesting that he was using the scandal to distract from his own failures. The narrative was shifting, and it was shifting fast. "They're turning the tables," Claire muttered, her eyes scanning the latest headlines on her tablet. "They're calling your credibility into question now." Elon clenched his fists. This was exactly what he had feared. Graves was working his connections in the media to poison the narrative, and already, some of the public was beginning to doubt the authenticity of the evidence. The world was once again divided. "I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight," Elon said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "This isn't over yet." The next few days felt like a game of chess, each side making calculated moves. Elon's team worked tirelessly to bolster their case, releasing more unassailable proof of Graves' criminal activity. They had phone records, insider testimonies, and financial data that painted a much clearer picture of Graves' empire of lies. But Graves wasn't sitting idly by. He had his own plan in motion. A smear campaign began to unfold, with anonymous sources claiming that Elon had been involved in the very same illegal activities that Graves had been accused of. The story spread like wildfire, and soon, people were questioning whether Elon's empire was just as corrupt as the one Graves had built. Elon sat with Claire and Samantha in their private office late one night, discussing their next move. Tension hung thick in the air. The battle was intensifying, and every move felt like it could make or break them. "We need to get ahead of the narrative," Samantha said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "If we let Graves control this, we lose everything. We need to go straight for the heart of the matter, reveal who's really behind this smear campaign." Elon leaned back in his chair, taking in her words. He knew what needed to be done. It's time to take the fight directly to Graves. No more playing defense. We expose him for the puppet master he is. The next day, Elon and his team released a bombshell. A series of encrypted messages between Graves and several high-profile figures in the media were leaked, direct proof that Graves had orchestrated the smear campaign from the beginning. The messages included detailed plans to tarnish Elon's reputation, with specific instructions on how to manipulate the press and sway public opinion. The media erupted once again, but this time, the story wasn't about Elon's involvement in a scandal. It was about the shocking revelation that Victor Graves had been pulling the strings all along. The tables had turned. For the first time since the battle began, Elon felt a shift in the momentum. The public began to see Graves for who he truly was, a corrupt, power-hungry man willing to destroy anyone in his path to maintain control. Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as he watched the news broadcasts unfold. The pressure had mounted, but now the world was beginning to see the truth. But he knew it was far from over. Graves would not give up so easily. In fact, he was likely already planning his next move, one that would come harder and faster than anything they had faced so far. The morning after the latest explosive revelation, the air felt heavier than it had in days. Elon could sense the shift in momentum, but the weight of the battle was still palpable. Graves had been exposed, but the road to victory was far from clear. As expected, Graves wasn't going to quietly accept defeat. He was a master at playing the long game, and Elon knew this fight was far from over. Elon stood at his office window, watching the city below. It was business as usual out there, but for him, everything had changed. What had once been about innovation and pushing the boundaries of possibility was now about survival. Behind him, Claire and Samantha were having an urgent discussion, their voices sharp with concern. "We've got to expect Graves to escalate," Claire said, her eyes fixed on the report she was reading. "He's going to hit back harder. This isn't just about public opinion anymore. He has connections in law enforcement, in financial institutions, and his network in the media is still strong. He'll use every last resource to discredit you." Elon nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know. But the public is starting to see through the lies. They can't ignore the facts anymore." Samantha, who had been scanning documents on her tablet, added, "We've already given them the truth. The problem is, Graves is going to spin this into an even bigger scandal. His next move will be to attack you personally, target your weaknesses. He's going to make this about you, not the evidence we've exposed." Elon's mind was racing. He knew Samantha was right. Graves wasn't going to just give up because the world had learned a small fraction of the truth. He had a plan, he always did. That night, Elon received an unexpected visitor. It was a text message from an anonymous number, one that had become all too familiar over the last few weeks. The message read, "I'm inside Graves' operation. They've moved up their timeline. He knows the walls are closing in. Brace yourself, Elon." The sender was someone Elon had trusted during his previous ventures, a whistleblower from within Graves' ranks who had been feeding Elon key intel about the inner workings of Graves' empire. But now, it seemed that the stakes were higher than ever before. Elon's fingers hovered over the phone, contemplating the next steps. They had evidence of Graves' criminal activities, but what if Graves had already anticipated their every move? He quickly typed back a response, "What do you mean by moved up the timeline?" The reply came almost immediately, "Graves has accelerated his plans. He's preparing to launch a new initiative that will change the narrative. It's all about controlling the flow of information, and he's planning to use his power to lock you out. You need to act quickly." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He could hear the urgency in the message, and it confirmed his suspicions. Graves wasn't just fighting for his freedom, he was fighting for control of the entire system. The initiative that the whistleblower referred to wasn't just another business venture, it was a final move in a game of power, one that would solidify Graves' hold over everything Elon had worked for. The following morning, Elon gathered his team for a strategy meeting. He couldn't afford to waste time. This was his chance to finally deal a crippling blow to Graves. He had no idea what Graves was planning, but he wasn't going to wait around to find out. "Graves is about to make his next move," Elon began, his tone resolute. "We don't know exactly what it is yet, but we have to act fast. Samantha, I need you to dig deeper into his financial operations. If there's a new initiative, we need to know where the money is going." Samantha nodded, tapping away at her tablet. "I'll get on it right away. I have a few contacts who can help me with this. But I won't be able to do it alone. We're going to need everything we've got to track down his moves." Elon turned to Claire. "We need to control the narrative. We can't let Graves continue to manipulate the media. I want a campaign ready, something that will go directly to the public, bypassing his influence over the media outlets. People need to hear the truth, and they need to hear it from us. Claire met his gaze. Understood. We'll get the campaign ready. But we need something that's going to hit hard. Something Graves can't spin or dismiss. This is our moment to seize the initiative. As the team scrambled to execute their plan, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that Graves had already outmaneuvered them. Everything they were doing felt like a game of catch-up. But he wasn't about to let that stop him. That afternoon, a news bulletin flashed across every screen in the country. A new initiative had been announced by Graves, an initiative that would change the course of the tech world as it was known. The announcement claimed that Graves was going to release a groundbreaking new technology, something that would revolutionize the energy sector. For a brief moment, Elon wondered if this was it, the plan that the whistleblower had warned him about. But then, the announcement turned into something even more unexpected. Graves was now offering to partner with Elon Musk's companies to further develop the technology. It was an offer that seemed too good to be true, but Elon knew better. This was not about progress, it was about control. Graves wasn't asking to partner with him out of genuine interest in the future, he was offering a deal to rebrand himself, to make it appear as though the two men were working together against a common enemy. Elon's instincts screamed at him. This was Graves' final gambit, an attempt to regain control of the narrative and the tech world. If Elon played along, he would lose everything. But if he rejected the offer, Graves would paint him as a stubborn villain, uninterested in progress or the good of humanity. It was a no-win situation. But Elon wasn't ready to give up. Later that evening, Elon called a press conference. The stakes had never been higher. He couldn't allow Graves to manipulate the situation any longer. He needed to take control of the story, once and for all. The conference began with Elon standing before the cameras, his demeanor calm but determined. The room was packed with reporters, all eager for the next twist in the saga. Earlier today, you may have heard about Victor Graves' new initiative, Elon began, his voice steady. Let me make this clear, this is not a technological breakthrough. This is an attempt to manipulate the narrative. Graves is not interested in progress, he's interested in controlling the flow of information. He's trying to drag me into his web of lies and deceit, and I'm not going to let him. The room was silent, the tension palpable as Elon continued. I've been offered a partnership, but I am rejecting it. Because I refuse to be part of a plan that threatens the future we've worked so hard to build. I'm here today to tell you that the fight against Graves is far from over. And I will not rest until the truth is exposed for all to see. As Elon finished his statement and stepped away from the podium, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He knew that the battle had just entered its most dangerous phase. But this time, he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the truth. Elon sat in his office, staring at the messages and emails flooding his inbox. The world was watching closely now, more so than ever. The press conference had made waves, but the real battle was about to begin. Graves wasn't going to let Elon's rejection slide, not by a long shot. As the hours ticked by, Elon could sense something more menacing was on the horizon. Victor Graves was a man who never lost, and he wasn't about to let his empire crumble without a fight. Elon was ready. He had no choice but to be. But he could feel the pressure mounting, and for the first time in a long while, he began to wonder if this would be his toughest battle yet. As the sun began to set, Elon's phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Claire. He opened it immediately. We've got intel. Graves is preparing a move that could turn the tide in his favor. It's a game changer. Elon's stomach tightened. He wasn't surprised, he had expected something like this. Graves had been waiting for Elon to make a mistake, to give him an opening. And now it seemed like that moment had arrived. Without hesitation, Elon picked up the phone and called Claire. What's going on? He asked, his voice low. Claire's voice was tense, but controlled. We've learned that Graves is planning to leverage the full extent of his power, his connections, his influence in the political world, and in the tech industry. He's moving faster than we anticipated, Elon. He's gathering support, and soon, he'll have the resources to launch a full-scale attack against you. He's going to discredit everything we've done. Elon's mind raced. He had prepared for many eventualities, but this was different. This was no longer just a legal or media war, it was a battle for power on a global scale. How soon do we need to act? Elon asked, pacing in his office. Sooner than we thought, Claire replied. Graves is already making moves behind the scenes. He's pulling strings at the highest levels. As the night wore on, Elon convened with his core team in the war room. Samantha, Claire, and a few trusted advisors gathered around the large table, all wearing expressions of grim determination. We're in the final stretch, Elon began, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Graves is making his move, and we need to be ready. It's no longer just about controlling the media or the public narrative. He's going after our influence, and he's going to use everything at his disposal to do it. Samantha spoke first. We've been tracking his financial moves, but we need to dig deeper. If he's using political connections, we need to know who's helping him. The government could be a target, and we have to be prepared for that. Claire nodded in agreement. I've reached out to a few of our allies in the media. They're ready to help us expose Graves, but they need more evidence. We've already hit him hard, but this next move needs to be a knockout punch. Elon listened intently as his team outlined the next steps. They had been preparing for this moment, but it was clear that the enemy they were facing wasn't just Victor Graves anymore, it was an entire system designed to protect him. The following day, the world was stunned by a sudden, unexpected announcement. Victor Graves had formed a strategic alliance with one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. The news sent shockwaves across the industry, and the headlines were filled with speculations about the implications of the partnership. Graves had managed to secure not just financial backing, but political influence as well. Elon felt the weight of the announcement as it hit the airwaves. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Graves was playing the long game, and now he had more resources than ever before to crush Elon's efforts. The attack was more sophisticated than anything Elon had anticipated. It was a coordinated effort, with Graves pulling the strings from behind the scenes. I knew it was coming, Elon muttered, standing in front of a large screen in the war room that displayed the breaking news. He's making his move. He's consolidating power. As the day went on, Elon's team worked tirelessly to uncover the details of Graves' new alliance. It wasn't just business, it was politics, finance, and influence. Graves had connected with powerful figures who could provide him with the leverage he needed to undermine everything Elon had worked for. But Elon wasn't ready to give up. He refused to let Graves win without a fight. Graves may have money and power, but he's underestimated one thing, Elon said, his voice sharp. The truth. We have the truth on our side, and no amount of money or influence can change that. That night, as the team strategized, Elon received an anonymous tip that would change everything. The whistleblower from Graves' ranks had sent a message again, warning Elon of the next phase of Graves' plan. Graves is preparing to use his new allies to target your companies directly. He's going to hit your financial resources, disrupt your operations, and make sure you're locked out of key markets. He's already pulled strings with certain politicians to target you on a legal front. You need to act fast. Elon read the message, his thoughts racing. He had anticipated that Graves would go after his resources, but this was a direct assault on everything he had built. It was more than a personal vendetta, it was an attempt to crush an entire empire. Are we ready? Elon asked his team, his voice calm but with a sense of urgency behind it. Samantha stepped forward. We've secured backup. We've reached out to allies who are loyal to our cause, and we're preparing to leak more information on Graves' dealings. If we expose his connections and the extent of his manipulation, we can take him down for good. Claire added, but we'll need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more power Graves consolidates. His new alliance means he has an army now, and we can't afford to give him the advantage. The next 24 hours would determine everything. Elon and his team launched a counteroffensive like never before. They flooded the media with undeniable evidence of Graves' corruption, exposed the lies he'd fed to the public, and revealed the true nature of his shady dealings. But Graves, ever the strategist, was prepared. He countered with everything he had, discrediting the evidence, flooding the media with counternarratives, and using his political connections to create legal battles against Elon's companies. The stakes had never been higher. The war for control, the future of technology, and the very integrity of their work was on the line. As the battle raged on, Elon began to realize that he wasn't just fighting for his companies or his reputation anymore. This was a fight for something much bigger. This was a fight for the future of technology itself. The day after the media storm, the air felt thick with anticipation. The battle had reached its peak, and Elon knew that nothing would be the same again. Graves had deployed his final gambit, and now it was time for Elon to make his move. The war was no longer just about legal maneuvering or public perception, it was about survival. Whoever controlled the narrative now controlled everything. The pressure was suffocating, but Elon had never been one to shy away from pressure. If anything, it fueled him. As the hours passed, the weight of what was at stake became clear. This wasn't just about business or power, it was about proving that integrity and truth could still stand against the forces of manipulation and corruption. Elon sat in the war room, the walls lined with monitors displaying every major news outlet, financial report, and political update. The team was silent, each person focused on their task. Samantha was sifting through more documents, her eyes scanning for any small detail that might help them turn the tide in their favor. Claire was on the phone, coordinating with allies in the media, while the rest of the team prepared for their final push. Elon's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was another message from the whistleblower. Graves is preparing to make a public move, he's about to make a claim that will shake everything. Be ready. The truth will be revealed, but only if you're prepared to handle it. Time is running out. Elon's heart raced as he read the message. Graves was preparing to launch a last-ditch effort to destroy him, but the whistleblower's words suggested that there was more to this than met the eye. It was a warning, and Elon could feel the significance of it settling into the pit of his stomach. Claire, Elon said, turning to her. What do we have on Graves' new move? Is there anything we haven't uncovered yet? Claire paused, her face grim. We've uncovered everything we could. But there's something else. We've been receiving messages from people inside his camp, people who want to see him taken down. They've been feeding us intel, and some of it suggests that Graves isn't working alone. He's got deeper connections than we thought. Elon leaned forward, the weight of the moment pressing on him. Are you saying he's got allies in higher places? In the government? Claire nodded. Exactly. It's not just business or politics anymore. Graves is playing a much larger game, and if we don't expose these connections, we'll never be able to fully take him down. Elon's mind raced. He knew that exposing Graves was only half the battle. The other half was dismantling the network of power and influence that he had built over the years. If he could pull that off, it would be the final blow. We need to go public with everything we have, Elon said, his voice steely. We have the evidence. The public is waiting. But we also need to expose the people who have been enabling him, those who have allowed this corruption to fester. The following morning, the press conference Elon had called was set to take place. It was the moment that would define everything. The media was buzzing with anticipation, the cameras rolling, and reporters ready to ask the questions that would shape the course of this battle. Elon stood in front of the podium, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The room was packed with journalists, all eyes on him. For a brief moment, he wondered what would happen if he failed. But the thought was fleeting. Failure wasn't an option. Not now. He cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "we are here today to expose the truth. For months now, Victor Graves has been playing a game of manipulation and deceit, using his influence and power to cover up the truth. But today, that changes." Elon's words hit like a hammer. The room was on edge, waiting for him to reveal what they knew. He continued. "We've gathered evidence, undeniable proof, that Graves has been using his political and financial influence to further his own agenda. He's been pulling strings behind the scenes to control not just the tech industry, but the government itself." There were gasps from the audience. The room seemed to buzz with energy as the implications of his words sank in. "And it gets worse," Elon continued. "We've uncovered details that point to several high-ranking officials who have been complicit in Graves' actions. These individuals have been enabling his empire, turning a blind eye to the corruption and the damage it's caused. But that ends today. We will not stand idly by while a few powerful men destroy everything we've worked for." Elon paused, letting his words sink in. The cameras flashed, reporters scribbled frantically, and the world was watching. "This is not just about me. This is about the future of technology, the future of innovation, and the future of our society. We cannot allow people like Graves to control the narrative. We will expose the corruption, and we will fight for a better future, for everyone." As Elon finished speaking, the room erupted in chaos. The reporters were asking questions, shouting over each other, trying to get more information. The impact of his statement was immediate, but the battle was far from over. The media frenzy had only just begun, and Elon knew that Graves would retaliate with everything he had. The next few days were a blur. The news outlets were flooded with coverage of Elon's press conference, and the world was in shock. Graves had become a household name, but now, it wasn't for the reasons he wanted. The evidence against him was mounting, and the people were starting to turn against him. But as expected, Graves didn't go down without a fight. His allies in the media and government quickly went into damage control mode, attempting to discredit Elon and the evidence he had presented. The next few days were filled with accusations, counterclaims, and legal battles. The war was far from over. But Elon wasn't backing down. With each passing day, his resolve grew stronger. He knew that he had the truth on his side, and that, in the end, it would be enough to win this war. Elon stood on the balcony of his office, staring out at the skyline. The city was alive, full of movement, full of promise. He had come so far, and yet, there was still so much to be done. The battle with Graves was reaching its peak, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "Are you ready?" Claire asked, stepping up beside him. Elon turned to face her. "We're ready. We'll see this through to the end." The final confrontation was coming. The endgame was near. But for Elon Musk, there was no turning back. It was a fight for the future. A fight for truth. The final battle had arrived. For Elon, this was the moment that would define everything, the culmination of years of hard work, innovation, and relentless fighting against the odds. The world was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. Graves had pulled every string he could to hold on to his empire, but now, with the truth laid bare and his empire unraveling, there was only one final move left to make. The atmosphere in the war room was tense. Every eye was on Elon as he paced, his mind racing with thoughts of the final confrontation. The evidence was undeniable, the corruption of Graves and his allies had been exposed for all to see. Yet, Graves had retreated into the shadows, regrouping with his most loyal supporters to plan a counteroffensive. Elon knew the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get more brutal than ever. "We've hit him hard, but he's not going to go down without one last fight," Samantha said, looking up from her laptop. We know he's using his connections in government, and we've uncovered a few more of his backroom deals. But we're running out of time. Elon stopped pacing and turned to face his team. Time is a luxury we don't have. But I think I know how to end this. He took a deep breath. The final play was risky, but it was their best shot. There was no other choice. Elon's voice was calm but resolute as he spoke. Graves believes he's untouchable, that his money and power will keep him safe. But he's made one crucial mistake. He's underestimated us. He's underestimated what the truth can do. And now, it's time to expose everything. Claire, who had been silent up until this point, nodded. What are you thinking? I'm going to take it to the next level, Elon replied. We need to get the story out in front of the whole world. Not just the media we've been working with, everyone. We're going to give the people the full story, the unvarnished truth about Graves' empire and the damage he's done. The next day, Elon stood at the podium once again. This time, however, it wasn't just a press conference, it was a worldwide broadcast. Cameras from every major network were trained on him as he prepared to speak. This was his final chance to deliver the knockout punch. The tension in the room was palpable as he looked out over the sea of reporters, their eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to speak. Elon's heart was calm, his mind focused. He had already been through so many battles, so many high-stakes moments, but this felt different. This wasn't just about business or reputation. This was about something far more important, standing up against corruption at the highest levels. Elon Musk, the moderator began, thank you for joining us today. The world is watching, and we know you have something important to say. Elon nodded, stepping up to the microphone. He took a deep breath, readying himself for the final push. Thank you all for being here today, Elon began, his voice steady and commanding. Today, I stand before you not just as a businessman or a tech innovator. I stand before you as someone who believes in a better future. A future that is not dictated by the power of the few, but by the power of the people. For far too long, we've allowed the few to control the narrative, to manipulate the system for their own gain. But today, that changes. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. We've exposed the corruption of Victor Graves, a man who has used his wealth and influence to manipulate both the tech industry and the political world. He has created an empire built on lies, deceit, and exploitation. But what's worse is that he's not alone. He has surrounded himself with people who have turned a blind eye to his actions. People who are just as complicit in the corruption. We've already shared the evidence, but today, we're taking it a step further. The cameras flashed, the tension in the room growing as Elon's words became more pointed. Today, we reveal the full extent of Graves' network. We have the names, the connections, the deals he's made behind closed doors. We've traced the flow of money, the manipulation of power, and the devastation it's caused. And we will not stop until every last one of those responsible is held accountable. Elon's voice rang out, filled with conviction. The moment was electric, and he could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. The media, the public, and Graves himself would be watching this moment for years to come. This was the tipping point. If Elon failed here, everything he had worked for would be for nothing. But if he succeeded, it would be the final blow to Graves' empire. We are at a crossroads, Elon continued. This isn't just about me or Graves. This is about the future of our world, the future of technology, innovation, and how we move forward. We cannot let the few hold the reins of power any longer. We will fight for the truth, and we will fight for the future. Back in the war room, the team watched intently as the broadcast continued. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and they were all on the edge of their seats. The pressure was unimaginable, but they all knew what was at stake. Samantha turned to Elon's closest advisors. This is it. If the world stands with him, we win. If not, we might lose everything. Claire kept her eyes on the screen. Elon has the truth on his side. He's brought it all to light. Now it's up to the people. For hours after Elon's broadcast, the world reacted. News outlets reported the revelations with shock, disbelief, and outrage. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Graves, who had once seemed untouchable, now found himself under an unprecedented level of scrutiny. His empire began to crumble in real time as the public turned against him. But Graves didn't give up without a fight. His lawyers launched a series of legal challenges, attempting to discredit the evidence Elon had presented. The political allies who had supported him now found themselves tangled in the web of his corruption, scrambling to distance themselves from the fallout. But no matter how hard Graves tried, the momentum was on Elon's side. The truth was undeniable, and the public wasn't buying the spin. As the days passed, the legal battles intensified. Graves was left with little to cling to. His empire, once built on a foundation of lies, was collapsing. But it wasn't just the legal victories or the media coverage that mattered anymore. It was the people, the movement that had been sparked by Elon's courage to stand up against the powerful elite. The people who had watched and believed in the truth. And in the end, it was the people who won. Graves was exposed, his influence dismantled, and his empire brought to its knees. But the victory wasn't just Elon's, it was the world's. As Elon sat in his office, watching the final reports roll in, he couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet triumph. He had fought for what was right, and now, the truth had prevailed. But this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead was still long. But Elon knew one thing for sure: as long as there was a fight to be had, he would be there, standing tall. The world had been shaken, but it had also been awakened. And in that awakening, Elon saw a future full of possibility. Victor Graves has been brought to justice, his empire destroyed, and his web of corruption unraveled. But Elon Musk's fight isn't over. What's next for him and for the future of technology? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. What do you think Elon will do now that his biggest battle is behind him?